Praise the name.
I've been using one decidedly. And how to self-host some of the infrastructure. Yeah, ignore. Accept. Ignore. 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 Ignore.
Hot mute. Hot mute. Hot mute.
That burp followed by ignore was just great timing.
Are we live streaming yet?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Everybody gets to see what professionals we are.
Hey, we put raw in the comments or in the description. So I think by now, anybody that watches raw tapings or raw, I said tapings, I know.
A lot of people that watch things that say raw, they think something else entirely. And
that's just you and your dirty mind.
Now then, it is time. All right, I am just let's 3, 2, 1 and record thingy. So ready?
Yep.
No. Okay, now I'm ready.
3, 2, 1, record. Okay, had some nice banging and clanging there, but we'll live.
Sounded like he's got like a football game or something right outside his house. Maybe. Is it
3, 2, 1, 0.
0.
Well, sounded nice and disjointed. We're ready to go.
Yeah, that wasn't very good.
Par for the course, baby.
I don't play the course.
All right, who's hosting?
Who's hosting?
Just the field.
Bill, you're listed first.
All right. Let me go ahead and minimize Audacity
Got an
that
extra
way.
space there. It's space Bill. There. Just make it Bill.
No, it's hey everybody, it's Bill. It wasn't supposed to be first.
Everybody, it's Space Bill.
I wasn't supposed to be first, but
well, you did it.
No, I didn't do that.
I didn't do it.
It was Joe. It was Joe. All right.
Everyone gets to hear how much fun we have on these shows.
It's
hey,
all
if
good.
we were in the same room, we'd be killing each other.
That's a good thing. Welcome to mintCast.
How come we?
Okay.
Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. This is episode 396. This is episode 396.5, recorded on Sunday, the 18th of September, 2022. Hey, everybody, it's Bill.
Still not dead yet. I'm Joe.
The process in my brain to come up with something more clever has timed out, so I'm Norbert.
I'm Moss, as usual.
First up in the news, Stallman goes manual on C. DNF5 arrives in Fedora. LibreOffice gets fumigated. GNOME comes into its shell. They have put hair in the blender. Avast buys your cookies. And Intel fogs the processor market. In security and privacy, we have multi-stage malware, website leaks, and shell attacks. Then in our wanderings, Norbert is cutting corners. Moss tries a different mint. Joe keeps modding.
Mod.
And
big.
I fix a few broken arches, too, in fact. Again. In our innards section, ransomware goes to school, and finally, the feedback and a couple suggestions. First up, the news. Richard Stallman announces GNU C language reference manual, and this is from Phoronix. GNU founder, GNU founder Richard Stallman announces the release of GNU C language introduction and reference manual for covering the GNU extensions to the C programming language. The manual is written as text files and is published under the GNU free documentation license
That's
version.
Texie files.
Texie files.
That is a GNU free text editor, Texie.
Documentation license version 1.3 plus. Those interested can see Stallman's announcement, while the new manual is found via the Git repository, which we will have linked in the show notes. Fascinating. Norbert?
Fedora 39 looks to use DNF5 by default for better performance and improved user experience. This is from Phoronix. Fedora, I thought this would be Fedora 38. Fedora 39 next autumn will likely replace DNF4, libdnf, and Fedora 39 next autumn will likely replace DNF, libdnf, and DNF Automatic with the new DNF5 packaging tool and libdnf5 support library. DNF5 should improve the user experience and deliver better performance for dealing with software management on Fedora Linux. The change proposal still needs to be signed off on by the Fedora Engineering and Steering Committee, FESCO, but given Red Hat's involvement with DNF5, this will presumably be okayed and hopefully all buttoned up in time for completion during the Fedora 39 cycle. And there's a quote. The new DNF5 will provide a significant improvement in user experiences and performance. The replacement is the second step in the upgrade of the Fedora software management stack. Without the change, there will be multiple software management tools, DNF5, old microdNF, PackageKit, and DNF, based on different libraries, libdnf and libdnf5, providing a different behavior and not sharing a history. We can also expect that DNF will have only limited support from upstream. The new DNF5 development was announced on Fedora Devel list in 2020. DNF5 does away with the Python code to yield a smaller system, faster performance, and to replace the existing DNF and microdNF tooling. DNF5 also unifies the software management stack behavior, introduces a new daemon as an alternative for PackageKit for RPMs, and should perform much better. Faster performance can be expected around querying of repositories, advisory operations, RPM queries, and metadata sharing.
Next up, LibreOffice 7.3.
Sorry, I have some comments. Well, reading this on my Fedora desktop, I am recording on my Fedora laptop. I am a bit confused. I thought that DNF was supposed to be replaced by microdNF. So when I heard about DNF5, I assumed it's essentially the same as microdNF. But now they are not going to use microdNF. This is a bit confusing.
What the article said.
This is a bit confusing, although I have seen a video comparing package repo list, package list refreshes in DNF4 and DNF5, and DNF5 was significantly faster. Still not quite as fast as something like Void or Arch, but that's probably because it has to fetch more data. For things like, I assume, integration with the graphical software stores and such, because as far as I know, Pacman on Arch doesn't work with PackageKit. I might be wrong. Although I also thought this was going to be merged in Fedora 38. Sometimes people ask when they hear someone is using Fedora, how they can how do they deal with DNF being so slow? Well, I love Fedora. It's my favorite distro probably, but I still think that there is some truth to that. It is slow, but it's not quite slow. I used to not have package kit, and every time I wanted to upgrade my system and I typed sudo dnf upgrade, I would have to wait for it to refresh the list. But then I just realized if I have package kit installed, it will refresh the repos in the background. So every time I want to upgrade the system, I don't have to wait for it to refresh. It just spits out the list of packages and then I can download them. So, and you don't, well, the thing about computers is that as much as I like to tinker with my computer, you're more supposed to, you also should use your computer to get things done. So what I'm trying to say is that, well, never mind. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is that also if you just need to install a software every now and then, you can, if you don't upgrade every day or you don't have to install something every day, you shouldn't spend the majority of your time using the package manager, but rather using the computer to get things done. As much as I like tinkering with my computer, and I probably still spend more time with my package manager than I should. Anyway,
I'm going to mention that there is quite a bit of long news and security today, even with us having it split into the main topic. So we might want to chug this along.
okay.
So moving on to the next story, LibreOffice 7.3.6 is now available for download. 50 bugs have been fixed. This is from 9 to 5 Linux. LibreOffice 7.3.6, the sixth maintenance update to the LibreOffice 7.3 Office Suite series, is out. The LibreOffice 7.3.6 point release addresses more bugs and further improves compatibility and proprietary document formats of the MS Office suite, such as DocX, XLSX, and PPTX files. According to the RC1 and RC2 changelogs, a total of 50 bugs were squashed, which should strengthen the stability and reliability of the LibreOffice 7.3 Office Suite series, which is supported until November 30th, 2022. And that's for the community package only. Norbert?
GNOME Shell and Matter 43 release candidates bring last-minute changes. This is from Phoronix. The release candidates are out for the GNOME Shell and Matter updates ahead of this month's GNOME 43 desktop debut. While past the various freezes, the GNOME Shell and Matter 43.rc releases do bring some notable last-minute changes. The Matter 43 release candidate includes changes such as remembering of monitor scaling when switching configurations, embedding the Wayland output name into screencast streams, support for the Max BPC connector property in addressing monitor issues, improved heuristics for fallback monitor modes, color management is now handled by Matter rather than the GNOME settings daemon, support for scan-out of off-screen rotated views, avoid swapping redundant portions of buffers on screen, NVIDIA with GBM now uses the atomic mode setting path. Many crash and memory leak fixes along with other general bug fixes. The full list can be found via this link, which is, well, to get to the link, you have to get to another link, which is in the show notes, and the link is in the article. GNOME Shell 43 release candidate includes changes such as tweaking the quick settings appearance, improved handling of recurring events, working around the pipewire regression for screencasts, various other bug fixes, including memory leak fixes. And there's another link. These are two commits where you can see the details. The GNOME 43.rc state marks the hard code freeze period beginning. GNOME 43 stable release is expected to happen on 21st of September. And speaking of GNOME, we have some mobile news. GNOME Shell on mobile is shaping up nicely, gets new navigation gestures and quick settings. This is from 9 to 5 Linux. GNOME developers are working on a native port of GNOME Shell, the main UI of GNOME, for mobile devices, Linux phones and tablets, since the release of GNOME 40. Jonas Dressler shares that there's been a huge amount of progress since the last update in May 2020, and that GNOME Shell on mobile received a sophisticated 2D navigation gesture system similar to what Android and iOS offer, but with a single overview for both launching and switching. In addition to the two-dimensional navigation gestures, GNOME Shell on mobile automatically also received a new shell search experience featuring a single column layout for narrower screens. A revamped on-screen keyboard gesture input with a redesigned emoji keyboard that's more in line with that of Android and iOS, as well as a new fancy gesture to hide the keyboard. On top of that, GNOME Shell on mobile got the new quick settings that will also be available in the upcoming GNOME 43. New gestures for closing and hiding notifications, and the app grid layout has been adapted to portrait sizes and it now features a new style for folders. I'm really excited for this, mainly because I've been using GNOME 40 Plus, currently 41 on my Surface tablet, which I mostly use in a portrait layout. And I think the desktop GNOME Shell is perfectly usable. It doesn't have the 2D gestures. 2D gestures meaning that you would be able to switch workspaces and go to the overview with just one diagonal swipe, so you wouldn't have to wait for one animation to finish before starting the next one. And the other thing is that my only complaint currently about regular GNOME on a touchscreen is the keyboard, which it doesn't feel as natural as a native touch. It doesn't feel as natural as the keyboard on Android, for example. Mainly the way you bring it up with a gesture, and you can only hide it via clicking an arrow. And sometimes it's a bit hard to nail the gesture to bring it up. I'm not sure if this will, given the size of my tablet, I'm not sure if it would make sense to use this mobile GNOME layout, but I will probably try it in the future. Moss?
Okay, Blender 3.3 LTS is officially released with new hair workflow and support for Intel Arc graphics. Blender 3.3 brings a lot of changes, starting with support for Intel Arc graphics, which require Linux Intel driver 22.26.23570 or newer, AMD GPU rendering for Vega graphics cards such as Radeon 7, Radeon RX Vega series, and Radeon Pro WX 910 on Linux, a new Filmic sRGB color space for images, as well as a new hair workflow using a new curves object. The Blender UI has been updated with text fields that show candidates in more situations, always visible scroll bars, improved layout of file browser UI settings and the preferences, as well as improved performance of the view layer and library overrides display modes. This release implements an image from the plane marker operator that creates or updates image data block from pixels seen by the plane marker, implements motion tracking data prefill for compositor nodes, adds mask blending factor for combined overlay and a mask spline visibility overlay option, adds a filter method to strip transform, and adds a new retiming system to the sequencer. The timeline and dope sheet editors have been updated in Blender 3.3 to display grease pencil keyframes, as well as the action mode of the dope sheet, which now shows the action's active custom properties. The grease pencil received material selection menu using the U key in sculpt mode, a new noise modifier parameter that lets you define when the randomized noise pattern changes and change the noise in keyframes, a new ping pong mode for the time offset modifier, as well as a bunch of new line art functionality, including new shadow and light contour calculation, new silhouette functionality, and intersection priority. Blender 3.3 also adds new features to the modeling area, including a new property in the shade smooth operator to enable auto smooth, a new snapping method that snaps transform geometry to nearest face, improved UV quality and workflow, and the ability to use the surface deform modifier when the target mesh increases the number of vertices. Support for packing UDIM texture sets into .blend files is now supported in the new Blender release, which adds an operator to duplicate the active color attribute layer, adds an elastic mode to the transform tools, adds new icons for the trimming tools, and significantly improves the drawing performance when sculpting with the EV enabled. Among other noteworthy changes, Blender 3.3 improves the performance of the software when importing Alembic, OBJ, or USD files that contain massive amounts of objects, adds support for presets to the export operator, adds support for importing and exporting .obj vertex colors, and adds an experimental STL importer when written in C++ that's up to 8 times faster than the Python one. Boy, sounds like I really know what I'm talking about. This is how I do Full Circle Weekly News. I just keep reading whatever's on the screen and heck with understanding it.
That's what show notes are for.
Okay. Beloved browser extension acquired by not so beloved antivirus firm. From Ars Technica. Browser extension I Don't Care About Cookies does one job and does it well. It automatically removes the annoying but mandated "this website uses cookies" notices from websites. People like it, donate it to it, and don't ask more of it. A rare find for free software. Damn, this is the blank, bro. It saved like 50 minutes of my gaming time, LOL, reads one review on the tool's Microsoft Edge add-ons page. The tone changed when the solo developer posted great news on the extension's website. Avast, a giant in cybersecurity that just completed an $8.1 billion merger with Norton LifeLock, will acquire the 10-year-old software for an undisclosed price. Quote, I am proud and happy to say that Avast, a famous and trustworthy IT company known for the wide range of products that help secure our digital experience, has recognized its value, end quote, developer Daniel Kladnick wrote recently. Kladnick wrote that he would keep working on the extension, it would remain free, and asked for donations to cease. Commenters on Facebook, Twitter, and the extension's various installation pages did not agree with Kladnick's characterization of Avast. Quote, congratulations on killing the extension. Avast is a cancer on this planet, end quote, wrote a Facebook commenter. Quote, the cure is now worse than the disease, end quote, wrote another. Quote, sad to see a great pop-up blocking extension being acquired by a well-known pop-up creating company, end quote, someone opined on the Chrome extension page.
It does
Anybody
kinda
else
suck.
struck by the irony of somebody posting that on Facebook?
Yeah. No, it does kind of suck that they got bought by Avast, because I was looking for this extension. I couldn't remember what it was called. And after I read this, I do have it installed now, even though it's owned by Avast or will be. But, if Avast does turn it into a cookie, or not a cookie making, but a pop-up making machine, someone else will come out with another one that does the exact same thing as the old one. And
well, the point is they get to collect all your cookie data now, whereas they didn't have access to it previously.
Well, yeah, I guess there's that.
So,
But as to the developer, I'm Daniel Kladnick. I'm really, really glad that he probably sold this extension for a lot of money to Avast.
Yeah.
probably a
Yeah,
vast
I'm-
amount of money.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah,
I'm glad he made it big, because he made this great tool, and yeah, he probably got a lot in, or at least some in donations, but
Yeah.
getting a large amount of money from Avast,
You could
can't hate
say
on that.
or as Norbert said, a vast amount of money.
A vast amount of money from Avast, and I'm sure he'll love it. I am happy for him.
So I wanted to mention, I think uBlock Origin also has this feature buried somewhere in its settings. The removal of cookie pop-up messages.
I'll
I haven't
have to
tried
check
it
the
yet.
settings.
This one I know works every single time, and I don't think anything's going to change for anybody. It just sits there and runs, and I think to use that as a vehicle to send their own pop-up messages would be defeating the purpose of it, and people would just end up uninstalling it and using something else. Like Joe said, if it ceases to be what it's been for 10 years, then somebody else will come out with it. That's the beauty
Well,
of open
as
source.
I said, they bought a thing that lets you turn off the pop-ups without turning off the cookies. And that means they get to collect their cookies.
Yeah.
I think it's. I just looked it up, and as far as I can tell, it's not open source. So
not.
with that in mind, if it comes to choosing between an open source and a non-open source software that does the same, I will probably try this feature in uBlock Origin, and if it does the job, I will
Tell the
probably go with the
world.
open source solution.
Yeah.
I'm looking at uBlock, but I don't see it. And yes, I am going through the rest of the settings. I have it set
Well,
to
let me
advanced.
look as well quickly.
I'll look it up later. But for now,
Okay.
there's a show.
Yep.
And the next article.
Which is you.
Me? Okay, wave goodbye to Celeron and Pentium. Hello, Intel processors. This is from TechRadar. Intel is simplifying the branding for its lower-end CPUs for laptops, with the Pentium and Celeron brands to be retired as part of the next year. Man, Pentium hasn't retired? What's it been, 30 years? So what will replace these veteran brands, which have been around since the 90s, 1993 in the case of Pentium? The new family of Intel's baseline CPUs will be called Intel Processor. That means wallet-friendly chips will be Intel Processor, and the mainstream offerings will remain Intel Core with Intel vPro as the pro-targeted CPUs, as is the case now. The Intel Evo certification will also remain as a guide to the quality in the laptop world. The Pentium and Celeron brands are to be ditched starting Q1 of 2023, Intel says, so they'll hang around for a bit after next year kicks off. As Intel puts it, the move is about streamlining its brand offerings for the PC and making it easier for customers to recognize the value proposition of these CPUs at a glance.
Which has everyone asking, what processor do you have in your computer? Oh, I have an Intel processor. Okay, which one? It just says
I have a
Intel
Dell.
processor. Yeah,
well, it's got a Pentium.
I've got a Pentium in my laptop I take on the road. I thought they were. I didn't even know they was using that anymore until I bought that thing.
Granted, you say that, but then again, saying I have an i5 has no meaning, and I have an i7, i3. The only one that has meaning is an i9, and that's only because they've only been out for a couple of generations.
Those things don't exist. I know.
I have an i3, but I don't use the i3 window manager. Also, I found something in the uBlock Origin settings. On the filter list page, there's a section called annoyances. If you expand that, there are various lists, also multiple ones that I think are related to cookies. So I think if you turn those on, that might be it for removing the pop-ups. It's not very straightforward, so yeah, it makes sense that a dedicated extension would have more users. But it's there if you can find it in uBlock Origin.
All right. Well, I have nothing else on that. Moving on to security and privacy. First up, new Linux malware evades detection using multi-stage deployment. This is from Bleeping Computer. A new stealthy Linux malware known as Shikitega has been discovered infecting computers and IoT devices with additional payloads. The malware exploits vulnerability to elevate its privileges, adds persistence on the host via cron tab, and eventually launches a cryptocurrency miner on infected devices. Shikitega is quite stealthy, managing to evade antivirus detection using a polymorphic encoder that makes static signature-based detection impossible. While the initial infection method is not known at this time, researchers at AT&T who discovered Shikitega say the malware uses a multi-step infection chain where each layer delivers only a few hundred bytes, activating a simple module and then moving to the next one. Shikatega malware is delivered on a sophisticated way. It uses a polymorphic encoder, and it gradually delivers its payload, where each step reveals only part of the payload, explains AT&T's report. The infection begins with a 370 bytes ELF file, which is the dropper containing encoded shellcode. The encoding is performed by using the polymorphic XOR additive feedback encoder Shikata-ga-nai, previously analyzed by Mandiant. Using the encoder, the malware runs through several decode loops, where one loop decodes the next layer until the final shellcode payload is decoded and executed, continues the report. The encoder stud is generated based on dynamic instruction substitution and dynamic block ordering. In addition, registers are selected dynamically.
Makes
Now I
perfect
think
sense to me.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Somebody had a lot of fun with that shell script.
based on Shikitaganai, it is probably a wordplay on some Japanese words that I. While Joe reads the next article, I will do some. I'll be right back. I have a rabbit hole to dwell
Yes,
into.
sir. Over 80%
Enjoy.
of the top websites leak user searches to advertisers. This is from Bleeping Computer. Security researchers found that roughly 8 out of 10 websites featuring a search bar will leak their visitors' search terms to online advertisers like Google. This practice has the implication of breaching the user's privacy and leaking sensitive information to a massive network of third parties, who could then use this data to deliver targeted advertisements or track your behavior on the web. This data is shared among the network members or sold to more entities, leaving users unable to estimate their exposure or stop its dissemination. While some websites may declare this practice in their user policy, visitors typically don't read these and assume that the information they enter on embedded search fields is isolated from big data brokers. Does anybody actually assume that anymore? I assume if I do something on the internet, everybody knows it.
Joe, we are advanced users.
We're power users.
To conduct this research, Norton Labs created a crawler capable of going past interstitials or other browsing disruptions and human confirmation challenges to scan what happens on the top million websites. The crawler located the search input on the visited sites, searched for the term jelly beans, and then collected all network traffic. The idea was to scrutinize the HTTP network requests to see if jelly beans appeared anywhere in requests to third-party partners, which it did in 81.3% of the cases. The network requests comprise the URL, the request referrer header, which provides more details about the resource to be fetched by the server that receives the request, and the payload, which typically contains browser fingerprint and clickstream data. The results showed that most search term leaks came through the referrer header and the URL, while payloads contained jelly beans in 21.2% of the examined cases. In total, 81.3% of the visited 1 million sites leaked information to advertisers via at least one of the inspected 3 locations. And the other 20% of the information that wasn't leaked, yeah, that was leaked too. You just couldn't find where.
18.7.
Yeah, 18.7. Norton Labs underlines that this should be taken as the lowest number, with the actual percentage likely being even higher. Yeah, basically what we said. For example, many payloads in the HTTP requests were obfuscated, so the analysis tools couldn't identify the search string, but it might have been there. And doesn't everything go over HTTPS nowadays anyway? As for the disclosure of the data sharing practice on privacy policies, the crawler found that only 13% mentioned search terms specifically, while 75% contained the generic sharing of user information with third parties statement. Unfortunately, there's not much that users can do about this problem besides setting their browsers to block all third-party trackers from loading on the websites that they visit. I mean, even DuckDuckGo got called out for sharing information with Google, wasn't it?
It was Microsoft.
Microsoft,
yeah.
my apologies.
And they did cut off Microsoft on that, which Microsoft tried to sue them for, but that's okay.
Norbert?
I have some updates on the apparently on the Japanese sounding phrase that was hurting my brain, and I have no idea based on what, but so maybe I wasn't paying attention. They named it Shikitega because it is using the. So it says, I found an article in itnews.com.au. AT&T has named the malware Shikitega after finding that it uses the Shikataganai polymorphic XOR additive feedback encoder. So Shikataganai is a common Japanese phrase that I for some reason didn't recognize. It means that there are no means, so nothing can be done about something. But I'm not sure how Shikataganai became Shikitega. Okay, I'm probably suspect to the Dunning-Kruger effect because I think I know enough about Japanese to make sense of this, but I probably don't. So moving forward, there's a GIF shell attack that creates reverse shell using Microsoft Teams GIFs from Bleeping Computer. A new attack technique called GIF shell allows threat actors to abuse Microsoft Teams for novel phishing attacks and covertly executing commands to steal data using GIFs. The new attack scenario shared exclusively with Bleeping Computer illustrates how attackers can string together numerous Microsoft Teams vulnerabilities and flaws to abuse legitimate Microsoft infrastructure to deliver malicious code, malicious files, commands, and perform exfiltrating data via GIFs. As data exfiltration is done through Microsoft's own servers, the traffic will be harder to detect by security software that sees it as legitimate Microsoft Teams traffic. Overall, the attack technique utilizes a variety of Microsoft Teams flaws and vulnerabilities. Bypassing Microsoft Teams security controls allows external users to send attachments to Microsoft Teams users. Modify sent attachments to have users download files from an external URL rather than the generated SharePoint link. Spoof Microsoft Teams attachments to appear as harmless files but download a malicious executable or document. Insecure URI schemes to allow SMB NTLM hash theft or NTLM relay attacks. Microsoft supports sending HTML base64 encoded GIFs, but does not scan the byte contents of those GIFs. This allows malicious commands to be delivered within a normal-looking GIF. Microsoft stores Teams messages in a parsable log file located locally on the victim's machine and accessible by a low-privileged user. Microsoft servers retrieve GIFs from remote servers, allowing data exfiltration via GIF file names. The new attack chain was discovered by cybersecurity consultant and pentester Bobby Rauch, who found numerous vulnerabilities or flaws in Microsoft Teams that can be chained together for command execution, data exfiltration, security control bypasses, and phishing attacks. The main components of this attack is called GIF shell, which allows an attacker to create a reverse shell that delivers malicious commands via base64 encoded GIFs in Teams, and exfiltrates the output through
Norbert.
GIFs retrieved. Yes,
I'm sorry. I got to cut you
yes,
off.
it's
We gotta
unnecessary.
move on.
Yeah.
It was going on and on and on. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
We gotta keep moving there.
Got to get back to the script, son.
Yeah. So Teams has apparently so many vulnerabilities that such a chain could be constructed. Maybe it's not such a bad thing that Microsoft is ending support for Teams on Linux.
Well, this is not Windows Cast.
That's for sure. Moving on though, GIF shell or GIF shell attack creates reverse shell using Microsoft Teams.
That's the one I just read.
Oh, you just read that. Okay.
Yeah, that's what he was working on. He wasn't continuing with the previous one anymore.
We
He
could,
was
didn't
working
have
on
it.
the-
we could read it again.
Oh, I couldn't tell the difference.
It sounded the way he did that. It sounded
They
like he
just
was-
went right into each other.
Yeah. Okay. So did I cut him off in the middle of that?
Yeah, you did. You did.
Oh,
That was harsh, man. Harsh.
well.
Sorry,
I'll have to
Norbert.
buy some more
So
strings. for
anyway,
the
just
tiny
to
violin.
sum it up, I'll just jump to the end. GIF shell works by tricking a user into loading a malware executable called the stager on the device that will continuously scan the Microsoft Teams logs located at there's a log file path. So I assume whatever it can fetch, whatever other code the attacker supplies for it.
Sorry
wonder
about
if-
that, Norbert.
Well, I wonder if this can be exploited if someone is using Teams in the browser and not the native client. Because you can still use GIFs. Although there's an app data path here for the log files, I'm not sure. That's enough Microsoft for a Linux podcast for today.
I literally don't know anybody that would ever have a use case for Teams on Linux.
Well,
I mean,
I work
university students.
I
mm,
work with Windows and we don't use Teams at work.
yeah,
Teams
it's
is
unfortunate, but
mostly what we were using for university stuff during the lockdowns.
so just put
Anyhow,
a
Norbert, apologies. We got a little confused because it sounded like you were still down that rabbit hole. On
yeah.
the
I
browser
apologize
thing.
for cutting you off. I just
Wait.
terribly.
Oh, I did say that. Moving on, I read the title. Oh, okay. I thought you were just cutting me off because
No.
the article was kept repeating itself.
No,
No,
we weren't cutting off for that. We were actually being nasty people that didn't
Pedantic
hear that
pieces
did
of
not hear that you got done with your rabbit hole, and it just sounded like one big long deep rabbit hole.
yeah. So we were all thinking it. I'm just the only one that opened his mouth and stepped in it. But moving on. Moving on to our bi-weekly wanderings. Norbert, you're first up. And I won't cut you off.
The fact that
I
you
promise.
the fact that you did not notice that I switched from the rabbit hole to the actual article means that you were not paying attention to any of what I said during the
Not a
rabbit hole.
word.
Okay.
We were paying attention to it going on.
I understand. Well, I had some issues with LibreOffice Calc where it would take a very long time to open a file, but only when opening a file for the first time after launching the program. Turns out it was because Calc was waiting for some printer information to be fetched, but I hadn't done any printing setup on the laptop. So I found a solution online, which is to set print to PDF file as a default printer. But I didn't even have a way to do that as I had no printing related packages whatsoever. So I installed the printing package group on Fedora that is called printing, which among others includes cups. And without having to do any configuration, after I rebooted, cups was there, and the calc problem just went away. And so the interesting thing is that I have LibreOffice installed as a Flatpak, and I share my configuration, user configuration between the two distros I have, Void and Fedora. And this was happening on both. But after I installed Caps on Fedora and I ran calc, it fixed itself. After I rebooted into Void and used the same configurations, it was gone as well. So probably if I were to uninstall the printing package group on Fedora, it would still be fixed. So maybe it didn't actually need cups to be installed, it just needed it to resolve something. I want to rant a bit about the state of rounded corners in GTK apps. More specifically about how GTK3 and GTK4 are a little different, since we're in a period transitioning between the two, and it creates some inconsistencies. For GTK apps, the way So no, actually, for both GTK and GTK4, the way Adwaita does things is the windows will have rounded corners when floating and sharp corners when maximized in order to fill out the screen. For GTK4 apps, now they have this flag design, and they also have a very thin, I think, 1 pixel wide border around the window. And not all the rounded corners and not only go away if you maximize the window. If you just snap it to one half of the screen, it will act as if it was maximized. This is a nice detail, as there won't be little gaps at the corners. You start to, however, bump into some problems when having GTK4 and GTK3 windows open in some automatic tiling environments. For example, Pop Shell on GNOME or the Sway window manager, which I'm using, and I noticed this. When I open a GTK3 window on Sway in tiling mode, it will still have sharp corners. It will, unless I set it as a floating window, by default everything is tiled in Sway, it will have sharp corners and it will behave as if it was a maximized window. But GTK4 apps will always have rounded corners in Sway, which is a little problematic because when tiling, windows always fill the available screen space, and you will get little holes around the corners. Essentially, the window has a rectangular space to fill, but it has rounded corners, so you can just see a little bit of the background of the wallpaper through that. And they also have this very thin border, which they look like as if they were maximized, but they act as if they were a floating window, and it's a little weird. I will probably have to experiment with turning gaps on, and that would probably look a lot better. But GTK3 apps will still act as if they were maximized, so they will have the sharp corners. So there's no perfect solution for me to get things to look consistently at the moment. Maybe I
Stop
can
using GNOME.
I said I'm not using GNOME. I'm using GTK apps on Sway. If I were using them on GNOME, that would probably take care of it because Matter apparently is smart at handling GTK apps of any kind. But if you just use a GNOME environment, apparently they have this inconsistency. But speaking of tiling and gaps, I previously mentioned that I'd really like there to be a feature to only have gaps around some windows and not others in a tiling environment. And turns out that PopShell can do sort of that with the Smart Gaps feature. It will not put any gaps around the window if there's only one open on a workspace, but once you have two or more, gaps will appear. This could be useful for my use case when I usually have Firefox on its dedicated workspace as a single window, and if I don't open anything else there, it won't have gaps, and my completely black Firefox theme can blend nicely in with the black top panel, be it either GNOME or anything else. Well, GNOME in this case because it's PopShell. Except that when tiling with PopShell, both GTK3 and GTK4 apps will keep their rounded corners, as far as I could tell. So instead of seamless blending, there will be holes between the title bar and the panel at both ends. Well, if I just turn on gaps, this will not be a problem. A few weeks ago, I talked about installing uBlock Origin and being very surprised about just how many trackers most websites have that you can otherwise not see, and it will just list them and block them if it can find them. Since then, I also installed it on my Android phone, where I also use Firefox, and it turns out even if an add-on has both a desktop and a phone version in Firefox, you have to install them separately as if you install it on the desktop and have add-on syncing turned on. So if I log in to Firefox on another device, the add-on will appear. It won't be automatically installed on a phone, so I just had to install uBlock Origin for Android Firefox separately, and it's doing its job.
That is because Android is not Linux, and those are Linux extensions.
No, it's a browser-specific extension. If I was to log into Firefox on Windows, it will still sync the extension. So desktop Firefox extensions are not bound by the operating system. But these past months, I also reevaluated my stance on what apps I use on my phone. Previously, when using Android, my mindset was, well, I'm already using an OS that has a bunch of proprietary stuff in it, mainly Google Play services. So it's okay if I also use apps that are proprietary. Apps like Google Keep for my notes, Pocket Cast for my podcasting, even my home app, my home screen app, Nova Launcher, and so on. But then I installed AppDroid out of curiosity and App Store, which only has FOSS software. And then I found an app that I haven't heard about before that I found pretty useful. Sorry. And then I found a number of apps that I haven't heard about before and that I found really nice. One of them is Tracker Control, which can block ads and trackers on all apps. It lists the various web services the app tries connecting to, and it even gives you the ability to allow individual services in case the app needs them. For example, when I downloaded my Reddit client, Tracker Control kind of went overboard and it blocked it from connecting to Reddit itself because it's so Reddit has probably an unwanted domain. So I had to just whitelist it so I could use the app. I was using my phone. Tracker Control was monitoring the apps and listing the services, and the results were kind of surprising. My third-party Reddit client, for which I paid for to get the ad-free premium version, that is a separate app from the regular version, still had a bunch of trackers and libraries in it. And my alarm app had them too, and was even trying to send data to Facebook. But my alarm app is just supposed to wake me up. It doesn't even have to connect to the internet. If I don't set up, for example, if I could set up it to play like an online radio station as an alarm, but if I don't do that, it should. I mean, I get that it is very easy and convenient for app developers to put these tools for analytics into apps, but the drawback of that is that this data probably makes its way into the hands of various large organizations who use them for data mining and targeted advertising. So the nice thing about Tracker Control is if I have an app that I don't want to connect to the internet, I can just disable all the network access for the app completely with one tap. So I did that for my alarm because I just needed to wake me up in the morning, and various other applications. And I also started finding some nice alternatives to the apps I was using. So for example, I switched from using Pocket Cast to using AntennaPod, which I've heard a couple of times from Bill, and I really like it. As well as, well, surprisingly not many things, because even if an app is proprietary, it doesn't mean it's bad. For example, I'm using Nova Launcher as my home screen on Android. It's not open source, but it also doesn't try to connect to any suspicious websites or advertising websites. So it's a good piece of software. I really like it. As long as it doesn't do anything unwanted, I don't really plan to switch to anything from it because I just like it so much.
Yeah, this is why I'm running Calyx OS on my phone, which is a de-Googled Android. And I've been using the Aptoid and APK Pure libraries rather than Google Play. And I can get almost every app that I need. The ones I can't get, I can still get the Pure APK, but they don't update. If I get it through one of these other stores, they will update as the updates come through.
Yeah.
But I obviously F-Droid is part of the process. But the other Aptoid seems to be my best store, but APK I can't talk today. APK Pure seems to have the most apps that don't include trackers. Anyhow, blah blah blah.
Well, for now, I'm not really looking to de-Google completely because I need the edges. I can't change the ROM on my phone because then I would lose the best feature of the phone, the RG specific deck that needs this ROM for the firmware to function. And that's the reason I got this phone. If I ever get another phone that doesn't need this, I will probably try installing a custom ROM. But for now, I'm happy to just using some open source software whenever I can. And there are, for example, Google Photos and Gmail and Google Maps. So there's a couple of Google at the time fine with using. Also, I mentioned that I was trying to move from Gboard to OpenBoard, and then I switched back to Gboard because I needed the Japanese input functionality. But then I could just turn off the internet access for Gboard. It probably doesn't do much because tracker control wasn't showing anything. It could pick up
You
unwanted.
use the voice texting on
Yeah.
Gboard. That's what it connects to the internet for.
The thing about Gboard is that it's just a very nice to use piece of software. So as much as people criticize Google, they know how to make present-use software. Oh, I almost forgot that I switched to standard notes, which I've heard Joe mention a couple of times.
Yeah, I use it all the time.
Yeah. Do you pay for the premium version?
No.
Yeah, because I like it and it's really nice. It looks like they really take privacy seriously, but the free version only has plain text notes, and I would really like to have Markdown capabilities at one point, but I'm not sure if I would want to pay for it because it's a bit more expensive than I assumed it would be. But at one point, I will. I also tried Joplin, which is similar, and it has Markdown, but it doesn't have a dedicated. I think it doesn't have a dedicated hosting solution. So,
Well, if you're looking to pay, then Evernote has the most functionality that I've seen.
yeah, I moved away from Evernote when they
Yeah, me too.
reduced the amount of devices that you can have on a free account.
That's
So
when I moved
far,
there.
yeah, Joplin and Standard Note just look really nice and feel really nice. I'm a bit. I have a little mixed feelings because Standard Notes, in Standard Notes, the dark theme on the desktop client and the web client is a premium feature. I can absolutely understand the Markdown functionality being premium, but I would have hoped to have a dark theme on the free version. Well, and the thing about Joplin is that, as far as I can tell, it doesn't. You don't need an account. You can choose different backup solutions. For example, Google Drive. You can, for example, encrypt the notes locally and then back them up to Google Drive and sync between devices. And I think they have a one that is hosted by them. I will have to look into that. For now, I just have my notes on Standard Notes, and I keep using Markdown formatting, even though it doesn't show up as Markdown, but I just got used to lists starting with the dash and space. So
Real quick, a pro tip here for I'm sorry, back on your keyboard.
Go on.
If you like Gboard, but you want a FOSS alternative that is pretty much exactly like Gboard, right down to the last detail, except it's FOSS available on F-Droid. It doesn't have the voice capability, but it's called Florist Board, and it's available on F-Droid, and it is the best FOSS Gboard alternative out there.
Yeah, I have not been able to find anything that has voice to text that doesn't go through Google.
That's
okay. Think of all the autocorrects that I'm avoiding by not having voice to text.
Yeah, and I have to rely on it. I tried getting by with Florist Board and then just switching back to the Google Voice, every single time. But I need it. I need the voice texting more during the week.
Nice. Then can it do Japanese? We have to see and find out.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's about it for me. So, Moss, it's your turn.
Well, I was pleased to hear that Ubuntu Unity has become an official flavor. Linux Unplugged reported on the distro, the desktop, and the apps included, yet somehow they seem to have forgotten who the dev is, and these positive reports are all about the distro. This is the first time I've heard this distro reported on and judged on its own merits. I've had a long-running conversation with the dev, Rudra Sarasvat, and it's so exciting that his distro goes official right around his 13th birthday. Stew on that, people.
Yeah, maybe we should have him on the show in the near future again.
He's a schoolboy, and it's the middle of the night. He's in Delhi, India.
Oh yeah, because
I remember 13 a whole lot different than this kid must.
Yeah, I know.
I've often wondered what happens to people like that when they get to be my age. I mean,
Well, he's already an Ubuntu member and already basically, by the time he graduates from junior high, he's probably going to have a job with Canonical,
So, like when he's 50, when he's my age, will he have the intelligence of a 260-year-old?
No, he'll probably be retired and
No.
sipping
When
Mai
when
Tai
he's 50, he
on a
will have
beach.
inherited Canonical.
Uh,
Okay.
but it is excellent, though. That is an amazing project on its own merit. But yeah, when you
And only
consider,
one of several that he's got.
and you consider who's doing it, you consider what's involved, and by the way, I'm also struck by how this flavor's got a strange kind of popularity to it, because I remember when Unity was forced down everybody's throats, all of the
Yeah, it was
hate,
pretty bad then.
and
It's like when you're in school and you have a mandatory reading list, and so you have to read those books, and it kind of makes you hate reading. And after that, later you will rediscover the fact that maybe you like
Yeah.
reading, but if you
Yeah,
can
I
choose
just
what to read,
finished reading War and Peace last year, so yeah.
you'd have sooner been shot in the face than to read that back in school.
No. Anyhow, let's continue,
so
shall we?
so I think that people just realize people. I think after Unity went away from the official Ubuntu, people realized that it is a genuinely good piece of software, and they just decided to start using it. And I've tried it a couple
Well,
of times.
on top of that, Rudra has made it better.
Yeah.
He has released 7.6. He is working on the future, which he calls Unity X.
Which
It's
And
will
still
have
the only desktop that gets multi-monitor right when you've got different resolutions and different refresh rates. They got it right from the beginning. They were the only one to get it right from the beginning, and they're the only one that has it completely right now. It's still a modern concept. It still holds up, I think. But yeah,
and
I
again I'm
digress.
let's quit
emphasizing.
slobbering over Rudra's shoes and get on with my bi-weekly here. I installed Spiral Linux. It didn't go so well. It hung completely several times, requiring reboot, and OS Prober couldn't find it to add the boot menu when other distros on the machine controlled boot. I have installed Peppermint OS on both my laptops, originally as a review distro for Distro Hopper's Digest, but more because I seem to have gotten friendly with it. After 20 years of using Linux, I may finally be mature or experienced enough to like using a Debian-based distro. So there. I'm really upset with myself in that I'm spending nearly zero time updating and maintaining itsmoss.com. It seems like Dale, Dylan, and I were really psyched when we started it, and since then it has really tailed off. I'm doing too many things to fish for ideas, and we never really finished cleaning up the WordPress look and feel. I'm not sure what to do, but recognizing the problem is the first step. I should also point out that our distro madness worked so well the first year, and then when we tried it again this last year, and mintCast was missing all of their deadlines, so we couldn't really say, okay, we're going to close this at the end of this week, get your votes in. So that kind of blew a lot of things too. Joe?
Sorry, can someone look at the Audacity and see how long recording has been running?
1 hour.
It's 1 hour,
Okay.
yep.
I just noticed that I managed to accidentally stop mine at 39 minutes. So for the past 20 minutes, my audio wasn't recording.
Whoops.
So
It'll have to get pulled from the YouTube.
YouTube, yeah. Okay. I'll quickly export this. Is it 360, 396 or 76 here, right?
6.
Okay, I'll quickly export this, and then can we do another street? Actually, let me just wait until we get to the innards, and let me start from there. It will be easier to edit.
Why
So
not?
I will just not
Look,
talk.
we might as well throw all of our Audacity recordings out the dang window and then just use the YouTube.
Well, not necessarily, because I can just take that segment from YouTube and have everything else intact as it is.
Okay, just start your recording up again.
But I'm not sure if I will be, if I'm not going to be the one editing. Then do we just? Should we just use the YouTube recording?
I don't
Okay,
know who's doing the editing.
I will figure something out. Okay, so just let's get to the end of the wanderings.
Okay, well, Moss, I wanted to say that, if you had to pick a Debian-based distro, Peppermint is definitely a good choice.
I am astonished at some of the special tools it has that nobody else does, that they feel advanced, they work beautifully, and it's just, I was just amazed. You'll get my report when we do distro hoppers.
Okay, well, I have been busy for the last few weeks, but I'm not sure how much of it is really worth talking about. I fixed a couple of bikes, and I've been doing a lot of biking in the evenings when I can. I paid $10 for a bike that had parts that I needed, so I could fix 2 other bikes. I still need to get rid of the frame on that one, though, so it's not taking up space in my backyard. And that fix is a lot cheaper than getting the parts separately. I mean, one of my bikes had the spokes had actually bent so badly right at where they mount in that you could no longer mount a spoke in correctly. So that means the whole rear wheel is just done. And rear wheels are expensive on bikes. So paying $10 and getting one that was the exact right size, the most I'll end up having to do is replacing the cartridge. And then I'm planning on using the bearings from the front wheel on that one, which is extremely bent, and using that to fix another bike. Also, in regards to bike, I redid my light mod, my headlight mod that I have on my bike, so that it would have a better seal and not let water into the PCB. This replaces the AAA battery adapter that a lot of flashlights have, but it replaces it with a micro USB PCB. It's the TP4056, and it's usually used for charging 3.7 volt batteries. This is so that I can use any USB power bank that I have to power the headlight on my bike. So it's much easier than trying to keep enough AAAs around or to do an 18650 mod directly onto the bike. I just grab one of the many power banks that I have, hook it in, turn it on, and it works. So I really like that modification. This is the second time I've done it. I just think I did it a lot better this time. And it looks good. I still have to hook it up. I did the mod day before yesterday. So I've also started my next series of Bluetooth mods. I have that set of really low cost adapters that I picked up from Five and Below. I'm going to be trying out making a neckband headset, since good ones are getting harder to find, and if I can't find what I want, I'm going to try and make it. I have 3D printed a neckband that I found on Thingiverse, and I'll be modifying one of the cheap headsets to be 3.5 millimeter. This will be the easiest version that I make with minimal modification, but also will be the one with the least amount of battery life and difficult to replace parts on if anything goes bad. I do have ideas for what the next few iterations will look like, and the plan after the first time is to not use any glue to make the device. I'm going to set it up so that there's actual screw holes, and everything can be repaired or repurposed as needed. So if it breaks down, I can just redo everything if needed. I've also started hanging out on Discord with a group hosted by the Coder, and I have done a lot of live streaming of my soldering. Mostly it has been fixing headphones. These guys spend a lot of time fixing laptops and consoles, so they do a lot more micro soldering than I do and are quite good at it. I do enjoy working and talking with them and hope that I'm able to keep up with the extra time that it requires. This also means that I went through and fixed a bunch of the headphones that I had lying around waiting for me to fix them. I also had a couple during that time period that I deemed unfixable, which gives me quite a few good parts to work with, like batteries and cables to do with my modifications. Moving on, one of the other shows that I'm on introduced me to an application called Audio Bookshelf. It is similar to Plex, but specifically for audiobooks. I have it set up and I've added in my audiobooks, but much like Plex, it is dependent on folder structure. This means that I'm going to have to spend a lot of time cleaning up my audio library if I want to use it properly. But from what I have seen, it is a good setup, even allowing for changing the playback speed. Although the max speed is 3x, it also allows for downloading. So if I need higher speeds, I can download and use another application. It kind of reminds me of Subsonic, which I used to use, but with a better, more updated front end, and it seems much less finicky. Now, my left shoulder has been causing me a lot of problems. The tendons are causing me a lot of pain, to the point that I've stopped using free weights for upper body training for now. So I've been doing a lot of leg workouts, and I've been trying out different band exercise for upper body. I've been able to get some pretty okay workouts in using bands. It has been interesting to try and get the balance between pain and getting a good workout. I do have a doctor's appointment, but it's about a month away. The pain starts in my shoulder, and it's mostly gone, and then starts up again right at the elbow, and then down through the tendons in my arm, and my forearm, and my wrist, and into my hand. If you have any ideas on good band workouts or workouts that I can do with an almost torn rotator cuff, I'm more than happy to hear them. Give me some ideas, people. jb@mintcast.com. That's
Org.
Is it .org?
Yep.
Mintcast.org. Okay. Mintcast.org. And that's basically what I've been up to. Other than I did order a 12 terabyte hard drive to add to my computer. And I'll tell you more about that on the next show or on the Saturday show. Bill, what have you been up to?
Well, a lot went on since I appeared on mintCast the last time, but for the sake of time, I'll narrow my description down to a couple of key things I've been working toward for the past couple of weeks. First, many people no doubt remember the slight, shall we say, challenge many Arch users had week before last, when after an update, an update was pushed to the Grub bootloader, which left many people with an unbootable system, and I was no exception. I have one machine. Well, at the time, I had one machine running proper Arch with XFCE. That was the one that I normally take on the road. It's just a lightweight machine that I use to do just the light, usual stuff, not real heavy, intensive workloads, but the light browsing and things. And after the update, it was left unbootable. And then I have another machine which is considerably more powerful that's running. It was running Endeavor, which is, for all intents and purposes, just Arch with a fancy installer and a few extra packages. Exact same thing. Ran the update, and it stopped working. It stopped booting as well. And I was all too aware of the go-to fix that was out there, and that would have been fine, but I went ahead and used it as an opportunity to try out the new Arch install script that is on the default ISO. And I went into it with some rather, I don't know, I had moderate expectations that it would be robust enough to do all the things I normally I set up a ButterFS root with sub volumes and all that stuff. And in the past, using the traditional method of installing Arch, you would have to mount the root file system, add the subvolumes, unmount that system, and then remount each subvolume separately. And then this was a lot of things that you had to get right, otherwise you would have your system just wouldn't install correctly. Well, this installer actually speaks Btrfs, and as you go through it, it basically presents you with a list of things that have to be done, and you can go through that list one by one, or you can skip around, whatever you want to do. And the Btrfs option will ask you, do you want to create a Btrfs volume with subvolumes? And well, first it'll ask you if you just want to use the best, have us figure out your layout and all that, or do you want to choose what volumes you want in what order and such, but either way presents you with the option of creating and using subvolumes, and then it asks you if you want to mount those with the compression enabled, which is brilliant as well, because in the past you would have to specify that during the mount before you would do all of the installation and all that, and it was one more layer of complexity. With this it knows how to do it, and it sets it up for you right the first time. And then it also will ask you if you want to do encryption, and it handles that brilliantly. Set up the passwords, and then it's got you move on from one step to the next, and it's got the choice of all the desktops, and it gives you a choice between Grub and the default, interestingly enough, is the system D boot.
Yep.
Which is fine.
Did you make the wise choice?
System D boot. I'm not going to be caught out again. No, I didn't go refined. In order to do that, you would have had to add it, because you got another option where you can add packages, which you need to add Firefox to that list of additional packages before it starts the installer. Before you could do that, but you would have to bootstrap. When you do the bootstrap command, you would just add all your additional packages that you wanted right from the get-go to that command. Well, this just makes it a little bit simpler. In my mind, this is no less simple. This is no more complex than the graphical installers, which in my opinion, some of them are a little too focused on the visual aspect of it, and sometimes you can, like the Anaconda installer, for example, you can sometimes forget to do something correctly, and then you end up with a machine that ain't quite right. But anyway, this takes you through step by step, and then I take a look and make sure, because if you don't have it set up, it'll leave, you'll have the option, then it'll leave it blank, so you'll know that still needs to be done. Everything from setting up your keyboard, that's all set up by default.
Anaconda also marks things as incomplete if you haven't done them.
It does, but there's some people have a little bit of cognitive things going on, to where if you got too much in front of a person, sometimes it's hard to focus in. And
to be fair, they are working on a different installer that will be step by step and not the same.
I've never had too much of a problem with it, but
I haven't either. My one complaint about Anaconda is that you have to click on things and buttons at the top, but the error messages will show up at the very bottom, so it's easy to miss them if you don't know where to look for them. But yeah, Grub itself is just, I don't think it's the best solution.
Well, I was under the impression that if you were going to have an encrypted file system, you had to go with Grub, because it was the only one that knew how to handle. But the way this installer works is it handles the encryption through Lux. So all of that is done before the bootloader is even ran. Before it systemd boot handles it just fine. So I've got encryption set up. Well, not on either of my machines, but I played around with it on a virtual machine, and even with the encryption enabled, you still have the option of running systemd boot, which I was really happy to see that was a thing.
Yeah, I really think that distros like Fedora, OpenSUSE should just adopt and use systemd boot. An argument against that might be that it's UEFI only, so if someone wants to install them on a legacy boot system, they will have to use grub. But for a while, the Arch live ISO would just use systemd boot if it detects UEFI and fall back to grub if it detects legacy. They just started using grub for everything again. But the installer could just auto-detect whether if it's UEFI or boot
Yeah.
or BIOS. And if it detects UEFI, distros could just default to installing systemd boot, which is a less complicated booting process.
That is very possible, because if I remember right, some of these installers used to check and see if you had 32-bit or BIOS, it would use syslinux as your bootloader, and then if you had 64-bit, it would just automatically install and set up grub for you. So it's very possible to do. But
I really like the fact that Arch defaults to systemd boot.
Yeah, it's much more simple. There's a lot less going on, and it's a couple of config files with 3-4 lines, and that's basically it. The only problem is you don't have fancy theming or anything like that. So, but who really cares, I suppose.
As much as I like theming, both in my desktop, and I'm also theming my refined boot menu, if I were to switch to systemd boot, I think I quite like the minimalistic look of it.
Yeah.
So I like refined because you can have a side-by-side list of icons. But if I wanted to use systemd boot because it just has a list, like a vertical list, I like how it's very minimalistic. So I don't really have a problem with not being able to theme it. I'm not even sure if you can theme it. Maybe you can.
No, not really. I've never seen anybody do it. The Git package comes with like this Arch PNG image, but it's not really, it doesn't say what to do with it. So I don't know what that's all about. But no, for the most part, it's just a basic bootloader. But for my mind, the way my thinking works is it's part of systemd, so it's already on the system.
Not necessarily, because systemd is not a single binary. You can just have parts of it installed and not other parts.
Well,
So
by default with Arch.
that's the big misconception about systemd. People say that it's bad because it does too much, but it's not a single thing doing many things. It has many parts, and you can just have some parts on the system and not other parts.
Yeah, well, when you install Arch with the default installation of systemd, you're getting systemd boot whether you're using it or not. It's
Really?
just it's you literally just you install nothing. You just execute the command boot control boot ctl dash install, and that sets up the initial, that puts the stub in the EFI system partition, and then you just go write the couple of, you've got a loader file that you have to write, which tells it which one of the loader entries is the default, and then you've got a couple of the default, like the timeout, and then the size, the console size, and then you have a entries file. These are all just little text files where it tells for each entry you've got the image for the init, and then your microcode. You have to specify all these, and then you've got the kernel commands in each entry file where you specify the where the root of the file system is, and then read write, and then you can put all your quiet splash and all those commands for each one. But that's that's as simple as it gets, though. There's nothing to install. Anyway, moving on. The Odyssey continues with regards to building a new, more powerful Nextcloud server. I recently decided to replace the Rock Pro 64 I've been using with a decidedly more powerful, albeit older, ThinkCenter M93P with a 4th Gen i7. This was anybody that was watching the roundtable, I don't know what, like 3 weeks ago. This was I literally bought this thing right in the middle of that show. Moss turned me on to it, and I bought it. I'm happy with it. The Odyssey continues with trying to get ECC RAM for it, and if anybody, well, no, you wouldn't have noticed, but I've bought RAM like 4 times for this thing that I thought was right. It fit. It matched up all of the numbers that I thought were important. I plugged it in, and the thing just starts beeping loud and prints out on the screen that it can't find any RAM. I've probably bought $300 worth of RAM for this thing that don't work. So anybody needs any DDR3 desktop RAM, let me know. ECC RAM, that is. Yeah. So yesterday I lamented that fact on our meeting, and Moss did a quick search and with minimal effort found what is probably going to be the right RAM.
In other words, I gave you another set of chips that isn't going to work.
I only ordered one this time because I learned my lesson. I ordered 4 of them to have 32 gigs of RAM. And so I'm stuck with it. This time I only ordered one. That way, if it doesn't work,
one to test and then 3 more later.
Yeah, 3 more later. Correct. That way I'm minimizing as much as possible. I haven't even tried. The company would probably refund me if I really wanted to, but I don't know. For me, it's not worth the trouble. But more on that later. For right now, our Nextcloud server is still on the Rock Pro. The problems I've been having with it might be as a result of it not having ECC RAM and my insistence on using ZFS as the file system for the data directory, because I want to take advantage of the data integrity that ZFS is so famous for. It might be it might be that, it might be just that it's an ARM based. It's not really a consumer product. It's more of a product for tinkerers and enthusiasts, people like me that wanted to mess with it. Well, I want to set up something that we here on the show can someday perhaps switch to it and be able to rely on it.
Looking forward to that. You have to remember, I did a similar search to find a battery for my UPS and wound up with something that looked exactly right, but was 75% too large.
Yeah. I mean,
sometimes I get lucky.
I just didn't know it was that difficult to find RAM, because I've got every other machine's got DDR4 in it, and you slap DDR4 in it and it just works. For example, the machine that I'm using, my big work machine here that I'm on talking to you with, I just put some Corsair Vengeance RAM in it, and I really didn't give much effort into the search other than DDR4 desktop, and ordered it, shipped it, slapped it in there, and it works. So I didn't think I needed much beyond the size of the RAM, but apparently this thing is far more picky when it comes to that RAM. If that does not work, I'm just going to use the RAM that it comes with. I ordered some more of that. That way I can build it up to 32 gigs of RAM, and then instead of ZFS, I'm just going to go with ButterFS. The reason is ZFS relies heavily on the RAM. It does a lot of pre-caching before it writes, and if you have information that's sitting in what, I guess this is probably a gross oversimplification, but like a write queue, I guess, it can flip a bit while it's in the RAM, and then it gets written that way. And once it's written, There's really nothing ZFS can do to fix it because that's the data that was sent to it by the system itself. Well, ECC RAM has an extra bit of, it's got an extra chip on it, basically, that gives it some capability to fix errors before they get written to the drive itself. That is the limit of my understanding of how that works technically. But I know that it does work because this machine's got my Jellyfin server on it, and it's got 64 gig of ECC RAM, and I have literally never had a single error. It does a scrub once a week, and then once a month as well, and it's literally never came up with a single error. So I know that the concept works. But like I said, if I can't get the ECC RAM to work in that thing, I'm going to go with ButterFS because it's got most of the same. Okay, it's got much of the same benefits as ZFS does. It's just not quite as mature, and it doesn't do a lot of these things automatically. It doesn't self-heal the way ZFS does. With ZFS, if you, like, for example, if you've got RAID set up with, like, for example, in this server, I've got 3 12 terabyte drives on a ZFS mirror. And if I play a video from this thing, ZFS is comparing all 3 of the data on all 3 drives and lining that up with the checksums. And if there's a problem with any of that data, it's got enough parity to go back and fix it as it's playing. Now with ButterFS, you wouldn't know that there was a problem until you ran the scrub, and then it would fix the problem with the scrub. With CFS, it's done automatically if the file's being read. So that's one benefit. But it's important to me to get this thing up and running and get it running reliably. To try to, now we mentioned a little bit about this earlier, to try to crowbar everybody away from their dependence on Google. And I think that has become more important recently than it ever has before. Recently, a New York Times article, and I'll link to this in the show notes, told the tale of a father who, after taking photos of his son's swollen genitals, was banned from the Google services he had been using to back up his family photos taken with his phone, as well as his Gmail and other services. This story has become an arguably viral topic of discussion on many podcasts and has stirred up much disdain within the greater tech community. As a dad myself, I can tell you there is no worse thing to be accused of on earth than child molesting. Now, for those that aren't aware, the article basically outlines a story about a dad. He had an infant son or a toddler, and the kid had a rash in the genital areas, and got on one of those video calls with the doctor that have been popular in recent times for reasons. The doctor says, well, can you take a picture of it so I can see what's going on? Takes the picture, sends it to the doctor. The doctor says, oh, yeah, that's this thing. I'm going to go ahead and write your prescription. Go get that, put it on the region, and Bob's your uncle. Well, Google Photos backs up all of your photos to your Google Photos account automatically. In my case, it was backing them up whenever I was connected to Wi-Fi and charging the phone. Google has AI that is going through people's photos, because folks, once you upload your data of any kind to Google, you don't own it anymore. You are in very little control of what happens to that data after it goes to these services. Google's AI flags it as possible child pornography. sends it off to the authorities. The authorities look at it like, what is this? Why are you getting us involved in this? The guy is accused outright of child pornography, and his Google account is subsequently blocked, and that is it, full stop.
And from what I understood, even after he went back and proved that it was for his doctor, it might have gotten him off with the law, but Google did not reinstate his account.
From Google's perspective, what they don't want to be wrong about is if the police say, no, this guy is okay, the pictures are fine, and then Google says, oh, okay, and then it turns out the police were wrong later on, the guy does something else that is less ambiguous, and it turns out Google was in possession of the necessary data to stop this guy a long time ago. I guess Google feels it is within their remit to make decisions about this ahead of time.
And I can understand Google erring on the side of caution when it comes to the safety of kids. Does this still suck? Yes.
Can you turn off the Google Photos Save feature? Yes.
Yes. You can turn it off. You can uninstall it. If you can't uninstall it, you can disable it. But for crying out loud, you can also just choose not to use it. So, but the thing about it is it has to be actively chosen, though. From the best of my knowledge, if you buy an Android phone, by default, you're going to have Google Photos, and by default, it's going to upload to your Google account.
Yeah, most people have those things on and don't even think about it. Oh, great. I can check and see what I was looking at last week. Yeah.
The problem from a technical perspective is that these are very valuable services. I can tell you, after learning how to manage Nextcloud and setting it up and having to manage it, keep it up to date, and manage any problems that come along, there is value in these services that Google give you. I think that's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because you want the services, but you don't want things like this to happen. So
technology and convenience is inherently usually a two-edged sword, because convenience in technology can also lead to knowledge being lost in the population. For example, how most people had to cultivate their own food. Now they don't, because there's basically, because of the machines in agriculture, just a few people can
some technology can breed a form of apathy where people become dependent on the technology in order to, like for what you're describing, food and things like that. You very possibly could end up with an entire society of people that don't know how to go and grow food for themselves anymore, or cook food without a microwave. I mean, those things exist. And I suppose that same logic can be applied here, where we have these services available to us, and to be fair, all of these details are laid out in the EULA when you set up these services. You're agreeing to it when you start a Google account. Yeah,
most people just don't read it.
That's and I'm guilty of
that.
Well,
most people don't read it because there's nothing you can do about it. You either accept it or you don't use the service.
That's basically.
And when you have a Google phone, you don't have the option of not using the service.
You do, because like Bill said, you can disable various applications.
Yeah, you can. You got granular control, but the problem is it's only people like us that have an interest in these things at all that will even attempt to go and replace one of these things with anything else.
But also, in order for Google Photos to do the automatic backups, you have to enable that. So even if you have Google Photos by default on the phone, it will only, even you start it for the first time, it will ask you whether you want to do automatic backing up, and it will only do it if you click agree.
I think by default, it's got it enabled. You might have to agree to it, but I think there again,
You
people,
it will give you a pop-up, and you have to either choose yes or no to get to the actual app, as far as
and
I
I think
remember.
that's almost no different than for most people. It's going to be no different than just the click next, 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 next thing. You know, they don't really understand what they're agreeing to. But they just want the thing to work, and they want to be left alone, and that's fine and good. But you have to be aware that things like this are inevitably going to happen.
Sometimes there are those license agreements where you actually have to scroll to the bottom for the agree button to be
Yeah,
clickable.
yeah, I haven't had one of those in a long time that I can recall, but yeah, I do remember, and I couldn't recall offhand what they were, but I've been annoyed by those. But then I get to thinking, well, you really probably ought to, especially if you're using it for important things, or if you're using it for something that could be misconstrued at some point, especially when it comes to things like Google services. I mean, I think I had Gmail right in the beginning when it was a you had to get an invitation to be on it, because I was still a part of the university where I was attending, and somebody there was working in the office, and they said, "Well, you need to try this new thing." And I thought, "Yeah, new email address. That's just what I need." But I ended up doing it, and then I liked the way it worked so much, I kind of switched my whole life over to it. And then as services got added, I mean, in those days it was Gmail and the search, and there was a few other things, but not much of anything people were kind of roped into using like they are now.
That's the thing. Google knows how to make the things convenient to
Yeah.
use and pleasant to use.
Because they're all too aware that that is the necessary component to coming up with a service that people are not likely to look for alternatives to. This kind of drives home the point, though. If you have the skill set to look for something else, I think it's kind of I think it implores upon people like us to go and find these things. That way, at least somebody's using them, and the word is getting out, and then these services are improved upon. Because the reality is, when it comes to backing up photos, there's really no, I mean, there's people out there looking for alternatives, but if you want the benefits of having geotagging done automatically, and then being able to really simply search for, if you've just got, as many people nowadays do, you've got millions of photos backed up, and you want to search for a photo that was taken in a specific place, and that has maybe dogs in it. Like I got this picture somewhere with my dog in it that died 4 years ago, but I just can't seem to find it. Well, you can, with Google Photos, you can search for any photos that have a dog in it, and there you go. That there is really not much of an alternative to that out there. So at present, some of the things I'm going to talk about, you're gonna have to sacrifice stuff like that for the sake of keeping your photos backed up in a way that is, respecting of your privacy, and the integrity of your data. Uh, but again, as a dad, I can't think of anything else, anything worse to be accused of than taking pictures of one of my children for the sake of sexual gratification. I find these stories appalling, and it's things like this that drive home the importance of learning alternatives to Google services, and how to self-host some of the infrastructure, some of which we've come to take for granted. This dystopia is not likely to improve. And I think it's important to get things into place as quickly as possible to replace things like Google Docs, Google Photos, and the like. In the case of our show, Nextcloud is a perfectly usable alternative, because it has the benefits of Google Docs with the use of an integrated LibreOffice. It's got the calendaring and the drive. It's all a matter of, how much drive space you can afford. Right now, we've got the 2 drives that are in this thing are a couple of 2 terabyte Iron Wolf drives, and I think that will be enough with the ZFS compression and all that to store stuff for a long time. But I think if I was able to convince everybody to do that, it would be a slow process and it wouldn't be painless. But it also needs to be performant. It needs to be able to be something that we can use to do the show editing that has the features that we're used to having, and it's the transition would be as painless as possible. So it's kind of important to get it set up right the first time, and things like this article that have recently come to light, things like this article kind of drive home the importance of it. So anyway, that's it for me. Anybody else got anything? If not, moving on to our Linux innards. Now, this is basically what we're going to be talking about here. Is we're going to deep dive, I guess, a little bit into some news that's been going on. Article published by Bleeping Computer, series titled "This Week in Ransomware." Each week as a news summary on the topic. In early September, they covered multiple times schools being increasingly targeted by ransomware, and we decided to cover it in the innards.
Yeah, we had a whole nother topic picked out and ready to go. That'll have to wait another 2 weeks. But it's not a big deal. At least we'll have most of the show notes for it, at least the ideas for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a huge article, and so we figured instead of doing it, in the security section, we do it in the innards section.
Yeah, it's multiple closely related articles from the same source.
I'll go ahead and read the first one, and if somebody wants to take the second one, go ahead.
Okay, I sure thought I had a name there.
Oh, did you? Well, Moss, I turn off the editing view. There it is. I turn that off when I'm reading it for obvious reasons.
Moss-related purposes.
Moss-related purposes. So
I didn't even know you could turn it on.
Oh yeah,
I am doing it for your own good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Says the guy with the needle. Okay, so first up, second largest U.S. school district, LAUSD. I assume that stands for Los Angeles something school district. Los Angeles Unified. Los Angeles Unified, the second largest school district in the U.S., disclosed that a ransomware attack hit its information technology systems over the weekend. LAUSD enrolls more than 640,000 students spanning from kindergarten through 12th grade. It includes Los Angeles and 31 smaller municipalities, as well as several Los Angeles County unincorporated sections. The school district first revealed district-wide technical issues after discovering that the attackers disrupted access to LAUSD systems, including email servers. Roughly 7 hours later, it confirmed that this was a ransomware attack, tagged the incident as criminal in nature. LAUSD reported the incident and is working with law enforcement and federal agencies, the FBI and CISA, as part of an ongoing investigation and incident response. After the district contacted officials over the holiday weekend, the White House brought together the Department of Education, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency to provide rapid incident response support to Los Angeles Unified, building on the immediate support of local law enforcement agencies, the district said. At the district's request, agencies marshaled significant resources to assess, protect, and advise Los Angeles Unified Response, as well as future planned mitigation protocols. And I just realized that I read Moss's section there. My apologies to him, but
Even after he told you it was his section,
yeah, gee whiz.
you were just like, I ain't listening.
Can I embarrass myself one more time?
Gee,
before the end
Bill,
of the
how
show?
come your mom lets you have 2 articles?
Oh no, I mean, yeah, it is what it is. But
Harsh, Bill. Harsh.
I hope he tries real hard to not take it personal. Oh, I turned editing mode back on and I see he erased it.
Yep.
So, it's good that these things get. It's good that it gets hit or it gets caught, you know, and that schools take it seriously.
Well, they will start taking it seriously after something like this happens. It's
Right.
generally true with security and privacy and everything that happens ever, is that sometimes things will only get fixed if something really breaks or if something really bad happens.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, whenever I start talking tech to all the people in my world, they all give me that. Well, they in their minds they're hearing wah 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 wah, and then it turns out these things really are important. That regular people are relying on all of these technical
Well,
infrastructures.
at least now you know what it feels like when I started talking about Japanese.
Again, I'm gonna figure out one more way to embarrass myself before we're done. Don't worry.
これが許せないだった。
My son speaks Japanese, by the way, for no good reason whatsoever.
Oh, that's always a good reason to speak foreign languages.
Well, he's a quarter Mexican, and he doesn't speak Spanish. And his mother speaks Spanish, and her mother speaks Spanish. There's people all around him speaking Spanish, and as a matter of contention, he does not speak Spanish because that's what people. So he must have worked out that Japanese was the existential opposite of Spanish and went out and learned that.
Well,
So,
I got interested in Japanese, partly because I'm interested in tea culture, but also it's so far away geographically, so it's so different from anything that we have in the West, and it seemed easier to learn than Chinese. I mean,
yeah,
Korean might be easier to learn than Japanese, but I'm more interested in Japanese culture, so I just stuck with Japanese.
I think in my son's case, it had more to do with anime. Moss,
I didn't want to say
apologize
that, but
for-
that was the first thing that started for me as well.
yeah,
Because, yeah,
Moss, I apologize for reading your article because I just now realized after I turned it on, made a big deal out of that, and then I didn't even read whose name was next to the article, so I apologize. So, let me know if anybody has any idea of how to make a fool of myself anymore.
We'll work on it.
All right, appreciate it. Norbert, I think you got the.
well, Moss, do you want to take the second one?
The Vice Society one?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. The FBI, CISA, and MSISAC warned today of U.S. school districts being increasingly targeted by the Vice Society ransomware group, with more attacks expected after the start of the new school year. They also, quote, anticipate attacks may increase as the 2022-2023 school year begins and criminal ransomware groups perceive opportunities for successful attacks, end quote. Attacks on the education sector, mainly targeting kindergarten through K-12 institutions, have a massive impact on their operations, ranging from restricted access to networks and data, delayed exams, and canceled school days to the theft of personal information belonging to students and school staff. The victims have been asked to share attack details with the FBI. Network defenders are advised to take measures to defend against and limit the impact of ransomware attacks, including prioritizing and remediating known exploited vulnerabilities, training their users to recognize and report phishing attempts commonly used as initial attack vectors, and enabling and enforcing multi-factor authentication. The FBI also asked victims to share logs and other information linked to the attacks. The FBI is seeking any information that can be shared to include boundary logs showing communication to and from foreign IP addresses, a sample ransom note, communications with Vice Society actors, Bitcoin wallet information, decryptor files, and/or a benign sample of an encrypted file, the federal law enforcement agency said.
Now, that whole things that they said that they should do, that sounds like, something that every school should have had in place already. I mean, the two-factor authentic. This is just common sense crap.
Well, Los
Seriously.
Angeles School District, I can definitely see, but like Granger County schools, they probably would have never thought of anything like that. Yeah.
The school districts here in the DFW area have the exact same problem, where they don't have 2FA, they don't have proper encryption, they don't have somebody checking to make sure that their personal data is not accessible from a public viewpoint. I mean, it's really bad. The school got hacked last year, I think, and a whole bunch of personal information that the school hasn't disclosed was just released into the wild.
Yeah, like I said,
when COVID hit this school district, the first thing they shut down was their computer science classes.
And again, is it because these institutions are not putting the appropriate amount of resources towards information technology? Are they
probably
hiring the least amount of people
100%.
as possible? Yeah.
Well, no, it's not just the least amount of people possible. I mean, even a large school district could get away with a minimal IT team. The whole thing is that they actually, if they're going to go with 2 or 3 guys for their IT team to get everything set up properly, they're going to have to be knowledgeable guys.
Yeah.
That know how
there's
to
more
do
here.
things.
Shall we keep going?
Sorry, that I'm thinking about the scale of this. My school where my high school where I went to, there were around 600 students there. This school district, we don't have school districts here, but the number 600,000, that's basically the equivalent of 1,000 of the schools where I went to. So that would, I assume the IT staff has to be people who sometimes go to the schools to solve stuff. So that has to be, well, if let's say 1,000 people.
A
Just
database, a secure database is scalable. So a secure database that works for 600 people, as long as you have enough hardware resources dedicated to it, should work for a much larger school, as long as it's actually secure, right?
Yes, but you also have to make sure that the infrastructure at the school is also secure.
And I couldn't even tell you if there is an actual bespoke IT department in Fort Wayne Community Schools. And the reason I say that is because I've got kids in 3 different schools that are using 3 different types of technology, which is telling me that each school is just that it's a hodgepodge of different things.
It's actually really bad, everywhere, I assume, but with the school district here, within one school district, because they have multiple grade schools, multiple middle schools, one high school, but because there are multiple schools within the one school district, each one is using different applications, different front ends, different back ends, different setups. It should be unified, but
it should be standardized within it.
Well, that's not the case here in Granger County. We do have a unified system, but I still don't think we have good security.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be done right from the ground up. It really does. My daughter's got an iPad. My middle school son's got a Chromebook and my high school son has a ThinkPad. I mean, so they're not even unified on the operating system they're using.
Well, we're all on Chromebooks. Almost all of them are Dells, and if the students shelled out for a bigger one, they got an HP.
Part of the reason I think my high school son does not have, I don't know, can you get Microsoft Office on a Chromebook, the proper installation
No,
speed?
all you can use is like the 360 online.
Yeah, and he's in the what they misnomer introduction to microcomputers, which sounds like a class that should be on basic computer skills, but in fact it's Microsoft Office, and he's in that, so he's got to have a machine that's got Office installed natively on it. So I can understand that, but it's three very different.
Chromebooks are great if you just need something that gets out of your way in order to be able to do browse, do research, any sort of homework or school stuff. But once you have a class specifically on computers, that's the problem. If you either give the kids two computers, one with Chrome and another one with Windows, because I don't think you can do much in terms of getting into how the system works on Chrome OS. Or you can just have them use computers in a computer lab that has Windows or Linux on it.
Okay, still got half the article to go here. Should I continue?
Go right ahead.
Yes, please.
Vice Society is a threat group known for deploying multiple ransomware strains on their victims' networks, such as Hello Kitty /Five Hands and Zeppelin ransomware. They also steal sensitive data from compromised systems before encryption and later use it for double extortion, threatening their victims to leak the stolen data if their ransom demand isn't paid. One of the group's recent victims is the Austrian Medical University of Innsbruck, which was forced to reset all 3,400 students and 2,200 employees' account passwords after severe IT service disruption and data stolen in the attack being leaked on the gang's data leak site. MCSoft threat analyst Brett Callow said that ransomware attacks had disrupted education at roughly 1,000 universities, colleges, and schools during 2021. And Norbert has a quickie story here. The Vice Society claims the LAUSD ransomware attack we just were talking about. So I'll let him handle that.
Yeah, what's interesting is these two articles, the one about the LAUSD being hit by red ransomware and the FBI warning of the Vice Society ransomware attack group, were published less than a day apart on Bill Beeping Computer. And then several days later, there was another article about Vice Society claiming the LAUSD ransomware attack. And they say that we have 500 gigabytes of data from the network, which I can't imagine what kind of data, because if it was just like spreadsheets and plain text, that's either a lot of data or it's a lot of media file as well. Or maybe it's because it's 600,000 students, maybe it could be just plain text or spreadsheets. And yeah, so basically that's just what I wanted to highlight from the I'm not sure what the actual order of events were, so I assume the warning from the FBI came before they claimed responsibility for the attack.
Okay, I just looked this up. LAUSD has 782 schools and 460,633 students, with a minority enrollment of 90%. So this is not only affecting a lot of people, it's affecting a lot of minority students who probably need, well, I won't say it that way. It sounds a little racist. But, you know, they have enough things in their way already. They don't need this.
The Bleeping Computer article says LAUSD says it enrolls more than 640,000 students. But either way, it's a lot of
I
students.
just looked it up on U.S. News and World Report. They could have gotten it a different year.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the date on this is.
Yeah, I also chose another article which is not directly related to this, but it's just generally related to ransomware. Ransomware gangs switching to new intermittent encryption tactic. This is also from the Whipping Computer. A growing number of ransomware groups are adopting a new tactic that helps them encrypt their victims' systems faster by reducing the chances of being detected and stopped. This tactic is called intermittent encryption, and it consists of encrypting only parts of the the targeted files' content, which would still render data unrecoverable without using a valid decryptor key. For example, by skipping every other 16 bytes of a file, the encryption process takes almost half the time required for full encryption, but still locks the contents for good. Additionally, because the encryption is milder, automated detection tools that rely on detecting signs of trouble in the form of intense file I/O operations are more likely to fail. Sentinel Labs has posted a report examining a trend started by Logfile in mid-2021 and now adopted by the likes of Black Basta, Alpha, ALPHV, Black Cat, Play Agenda, and Quick. I'm not sure how half of those are supposed to be pronounced. These groups actively promote the presence of intermittent encryption features in their ransomware family to entice affiliates to join the RAAS operation. Quote, notably, Quick features intermittent encryption, which is what the cool kids are using as you read this. Combined with the fact that is written in Go, the speed is unmatched. End quote. Describes a Quick advertisement on hacking forums. Is it just me, or have news about ransomware attacks increased in the past 2 or 3 years?
Well,
Well,
yeah, it's increased every year.
yeah, I think for obvious reasons, you've got so many more people working remotely recently for reasons. Schools, I mean,
Yeah,
schools are back in session now, but they were,
so
remote for a while.
overall more data has to leave the internet of a company to get to the employees who are at home,
Yeah.
which, yeah. I recently came across an interesting argument. I think it was on the podcast that has a brilliant name, Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. It's a security rated podcast, and I think it was there. And someone said that some people say that the rise of cryptocurrencies makes it easier for ransomware groups to stay anonymous while they're getting paid. So maybe the fact that cryptocurrencies are easier to access and use makes it easier for these groups to
Well,
to do these
yeah,
attacks.
Yeah, it's easier for criminals to use because I just found a Fortune magazine article online says the world saw an alarming 105% surge in ransomware cyber attacks in 2021.
So it wasn't just me. It was, in fact,
Yeah.
increasing.
105% 2021 over 2020.
the joys of having a decentralized currency is that people can't track what you're doing, but the problem with that is that you can't track
People
what
can't
the
track what
criminals
you're
are
doing.
doing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Basically, cryptocurrencies can be as anonymous as cash, but with cash you have to be present in person to transfer money. They can just do it online this way.
Hmm.
I
Well,
think there was a counter argument for this theory on the podcast, but I don't remember what it was. Oh yeah, it was in part that yeah, like that ransomware attacks existed way before cryptocurrencies existed. So I think it might make them easier to carry out, but I'm not sure how much of this spike in attacks has to do with more people being at home office or as opposed to
Criminals
cryptocurrencies.
will find a way. I mean, yes, if cryptocurrency does make it that little bit easier for them, but if there wasn't cryptocurrency, they would find some other way of getting the money to themselves, even if it was using a laundering service similar to what cryptocurrency has, where you throw it into there and they do a whole bunch of random exchanges and then you get a percentage of it back. Something like that with regular currency could also be created and still anonymize you. So yeah, don't blame cryptocurrency for making it easy.
All right. Well, if we got nothing else, I guess we can move on to vibrations from the ether.
And there's a lot of vibrations from the ether
Yeah,
because
really.
there's several weeks worth here because I wasn't on last show.
Yeah, this first
Bill, you
one.
should probably take this first
Yeah,
one.
I'll take this first one since it was a bit of a
Direct
jab.
dig at you.
Yeah,
He's
I
not
will read
wrong.
this and then I will offer my input. This is from Bill Dietrich. Apparently, what do we have? Did he write 3 separate interactions, or did he just
No,
this
he
is
just
all one
numbered his
email.
stuff.
Oh, well, how nice. In my opinion, you kind of missed the distinction between pen testing and ethical hacking. Pen testing is an organized, contracted, usually team activity, and often is designed to cover all facets of the target: networking, apps, clients, servers, employees, physical access, etc. Ethical hacking is more of an ad hoc, solo focused, creative activity done at the whim of some individual. There is crossover between the two, and bug bounty is somewhere in the middle too. Restaurant announcing, again towards me, restaurant announcing Wi-Fi network name on a sign and using a simple name is not a security issue. Anyone can easily pick up the SSID from the air, no matter how complicated you make it, and any SSID can be drowned out or typo squatted by an attacker. An SSID of unintelligible group of letters is not safer than one of McDonald's. And if someone forces you onto the wrong network, HTTPS and certificate chain of trust should save you from MITM, man in the middle attack, as long as your software is up to date. You're using HTTPS and you don't override security warnings. Reason Number 3, reason the waitress types Wi-Fi password into your device is to try to prevent it from being copied and put into other devices and may be used for non-customers. Some devices, older Android perhaps, don't let you see saved Wi-Fi passwords. Thanks, Bill Dietrich. Thanks, Bill. Yes, I appreciate correcting me somewhat in the distinction between the two. I'm not sure that I was trying to say, and if I did, if that's how it came across, I wasn't really. First off, I don't know as much as I sound like I know. For starters, but I don't think I was trying to put both of those things into the exact same category. Because yeah, I can see how the distinction is important. And if, for example, if somebody was looking for a job in pen testing, the job probably wouldn't be listed as now hiring ethical hacker. So yeah, that I can see how that's important. So yeah, thanks for that clarification there. Now, as for the restaurant, I wasn't trying. I didn't mean that one SSID is safer than the other. What I meant was if somebody has an SSID that is kind of off topic, if you will, or it doesn't seem like it has anything to do with the restaurant, somebody could set up an SSID on a device, use it as a hotspot, and now all of that traffic is going through. Now, yeah, as to your other comment,
Right. So what you're saying there is if McDonald's had a Wi-Fi that was completely unintelligible,
Yeah.
RxCB, whatever, and then someone came in, hooked up to that Wi-Fi, and created a hotspot that was McDonald's free Wi-Fi, then
Right.
everybody's going to connect to the McDonald's free Wi-Fi.
And again, correct. If all of the HTTPS stuff is in place and you're using an up-to-date browser and you are not bypassing any protocols whatsoever, yes, the encryption between the client and the server should be enough in most places to keep somebody secure. Is that enough perceived security to rely on? That's my point.
There are some websites that do have HTTPS but don't have automatic redirecting. So turning HTTPS always mode in the browser is also recommended.
Yeah, and anybody that's going to set up an attack like that's going to know what they're doing too.
Look, I don't care that, HTTPS has taken over the world. If you are on a public Wi-Fi, I hope you are using a VPN.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely. You should. My point is always you should assume nothing is set up to work in your favor. You should always take the necessary steps to make sure that your traffic is encrypted, that you're not doing anything that could potentially get you into a lot of trouble. My point is that as a business offering Wi-Fi to your customers, you should not just wholesale pass that responsibility onto the customers. Now, as we just stated, it is a person getting on the internet. In my opinion, when you're on the internet, your security is in your hands. The problem with that is not a reasonable assumption to make about normal people. You can't even assume normal people have an updated browser on their phone. Some people might have, like, for example, my one nephew carries around an Android phone that's running Android 4. It doesn't even have a plan associated with it. It can only be used when it's connected to Wi-Fi, and he uses that to download and play games on because it's a perfectly usable Android device still. There are stuff like that out there. People are using devices that are not up to date. They're using software that's not up to date. They're using tool chains that's not up to date, and it makes them vulnerable. So just assuming people should have the updated software, the updated devices before they connect to your Wi-Fi, in my opinion, is just not the right way to go. That's the only point I was trying to make with the Wi-Fi SSID thing. Because there is people out there with vulnerable devices, with vulnerable software. And is it your responsibility to look out for their safety? No. But, making sure that your Wi-Fi is something that is obvious is a sort of an easy win as a restaurant. I mean, does that make sense to anybody else?
I think if the Wi-Fi SSID is the least confusing that it can be, then there's the least amount of problem.
Yeah.
Because some restaurants just leave on the default SSID of the router, just TP-Link or WLRT, or I think I said it right, and there's some random string of letters and numbers, and that is not very clear. But if it's a restaurant's name, that even if someone, I mean, my problem with the SSIDs is that you can have multiple hotspots with the same SSID, and your device recognizes the access point based on the SSID mostly. So if there are multiple ones with the same SSID, doesn't that confuse your phone?
I've never actually tried it, but
what if the restaurant has a Wi-Fi with an SSID and someone sets up one with the same SSID? Could the phone connect to, if a phone has connected to the real one before, could it connect to the fake one by mistake the second time if there's one?
It could, but a lot of your modern, at least Android phones, will let you know that it's not the same one. That the address of the
There's some
device
WPK
has
Yeah.
stuff going
changed.
on
Yeah.
between the
Yeah, because it also has a MAC address, the access point.
Yeah.
Yes. The MAC address.
Yeah, and for the outdated Android part, I think operating systems should just give you a notification about them being out of date if they don't receive updates for some amount of time. I mean, if you have a phone that gets updates, at one point it just stopped getting updates from the vendor. Maybe if like a year passes, it could just give you a persistent notification saying that there has been more than a year since the latest security update. Your operating system is potentially unsafe to connect to the internet.
Well, yeah,
At,
that would be nice.
yeah,
But
at least if there was a persistent notification, you could still use it, but it should just constantly remind you that it's not safe to use. As much as people like to hate on Microsoft for forcing automatic updates, automatic security updates are useful.
as long as they
And
don't reboot your machine right in the middle of the podcast or something.
well, if you make sure to have security updates or any sort of update on Windows installed at a time when it is convenient for you, it will not surprise you. If you postpone updates for weeks, it might just decide to randomly restart. But sometimes I just turn on my computer and boot into Windows just for
As long as you're sending all of your information to Microsoft, your life will be that much easier.
Just come here where it's safe. It's warm. You'll like it here. I promise.
Do we have Photoshop there?
We might. You just have to come and see. So and finally, the reason the waitress types a Wi-Fi password into the device is to prevent it from being copied by device. Yeah, I understand that. That's perfectly fine. I didn't really have a
Yeah,
problem
I
with
think
that.
that was my comment because we'd just recently gone to a Mexican restaurant and asked for the Wi-Fi, and the guy just came and typed it in.
Because I think they did that at the restaurant I was talking about that too. Because I don't think we did it first. I think we tried it and it didn't work, and then she's like, "Well, can I try it?" And then, yeah. Anyway, but thanks for the input, Bill. It was we appreciate anybody's input. You want to take this next one, Moss?
I think so. Brad Alexander writes, "Hey guys, was listening to 393.5 and thought I would throw my 2 cents in. First, I loathe GNOME. The problem is that their attitude is, quote, we don't care what settings you want. We will set things and you will like it, end quote. Then people complain about KDE having too many settings. In my experience, KDE Plasma has sane defaults, so I'm fine with it. I also have 20 years of muscle memory doing things KDE. Before KDE, I was using Enlightenment. My needs were fairly basic. I go with dark theme and the oxygen style. And you were right about Debian. I used to run SID when I ran it, and SID unstable was more stable than testing and more current than stable. As for naming conventions on my network, I have spent way too much time thinking about it. I use a Star Trek naming convention, and here's where the way too much thought part comes in. Physical hosts are named for starships. Intel machines are Starfleet. ARM boxes are Klingon ships. Spark boxes are Romulan. I don't have any anymore. VMs, containers, and BSD jails are all named for characters. What, he doesn't have any AMD machines? Most of my boxes are free BSD, and consequently, I use ZFS pools on most of my physical machines. Since ZFS pools have names, the default is tank. I use the registry number of the ship for which the host is named. So, for instance, my desktop machine, Defiant, has 2 pools, which are named NX74205 and NCC1764, USS Defiant from Deep Space Nine and original series, respectively. And the VMs/jails/containers are, where possible, named for the job of the box. For instance, my old mail server was named Uhura, while its replacement is Palmer. So that's how things work in my network.
I don't
I
want
love
you
it.
to take this disparagingly, because yes, I love it too. But I thought I was a nerd.
Oh man, that's awesome. It makes me feel like there's other people on Earth like me. But I think when he said Intel machines, I think he meant x86.
There are basically two types of naming conventions. Some people, like Bill's Mint Ryzen, etc., name them like cattle. They are more informative than whimsical. The other side, like me, names hosts like pets. Anyway, feel free to talk amongst yourself. That should have been yourselves, but that's all right.
Gee whiz.
Well,
I'm sure
thank you,
there's people
Brad.
like
We appreciate that, and it does bring joy to our hearts to know that we're not the only nerdy people around.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no.
I really like this. I have a friend who uses mythological figures for host names. Another friend uses star constellations. It's really fun. Once you have enough stuff to actually name, I don't just name computers. I also name disks.
Yeah, most of mine
yeah.
are named after Hindu deities. My traveling discs are like Garuda and
Yeah, I see
stuff
the.
like that.
Yeah, what's the one called that's behind you on the wall?
Oh, that's Ganesha, but that's not a
Oh,
computer.
okay, yeah. I recently came across a metal band called My Sleeping Karma, and they have this Indian and Buddhist theme of music. So anyway, I wanted to say that sometimes I use scientific names of animals, plants, anything for devices. I have this external SSD enclosure, and when I have this connected to something, it sort of looks like as if there was a tick, that was sucking on someone's blood, and it sort of looks like if a tick was hanging on of someone's skin. So it's called ixodes, which is the Latin term for ticks.
I think in my case, the naming convention for the devices on the network, because he made reference to my WH Mint Ryzen. I do it that way for devices on the network because there's 5 people in the house, and there's at least 2 devices per person, and this way I can say that it's this person's device. And in my case, I've got several devices running the same operating system, so I can narrow it down instantly, knowing which device and which operating system is causing a problem on the network.
Yeah,
But I love this Star Trek thing. I've seen things like this before. I do have a comment about loathing GNOME, though. I'm not a GNOME user. I have been in the past. I don't loathe it. Because it's open source software. What you have to understand about GNOME is that GNOME is probably the only desktop environment and suite of software that has a measurable amount of commercial imperative associated with it, meaning they have to take into account the commercial customers that they're making the software for.
From a usability standpoint, I will say that GNOME has improved greatly
Yeah,
in
it
recent
has.
years.
And a lot of that's due to Canonical going back to GNOME as the default and things like that. And so it has to be making it the the de facto commercial option for things like Red Hat and SUSE and Ubuntu adds the detail that there has to be as few layers of complexity in the user interface as possible, so that you're creating fewer attack surfaces.
The problem with GNOME, but not just GNOME itself, the thing about GNOME is that its defaults are tailored for a specific workflow that is intended with the system. And of course, you can install GNOME tweaks and give you the minimize, maximize buttons. But the way GNOME was intended to be used is that you rely on workspaces. So in theory, you don't have to minimize anything. Even when I was on GNOME a few months ago, I just realized that I don't really, even if I had turned on the minimize maximize buttons, at one point I just stopped using them because I could just always open another workspace. And if you keep minimizing maximizing things, it can get a bit confusing as to we have to rearrange windows, you have to move them around. But if you just have a fixed set of windows in each workspace, you can just switch between them. It's so that, and when people use GNOME, they sort of expect it to work like a traditional workflow with a regular panel and the menu and stuff. And you can get that you can get GNOME to work like that via extensions, but the reason why it feels janky is because it wasn't intended to be used like that. And if someone doesn't if someone tries the intended GNOME workflow, and if they don't like it, that's okay. It's not for everyone. But well, I personally switched from GNOME to using Sway a few months ago, not because I got bored of GNOME or dislike it, but I just wanted to try something different. And I realized I prefer Sway, but I still am very much interested in where GNOME development goes. So basically, GNOME well no I well I wanted to say that GNOME gets a lot more hate than it gets a lot more hate than it deserves, but it's also worth noting that sometimes when something gets a lot of hate, it's usually a vocal minority of users. And so because GNOME is so widely used, I think it's hard to get a good picture of how many people either like or dislike it, because when you see various polls among Linux users, even on the in groups and forums where there are more power users, asking what they use, the number one and number as far as desktop environments go, the number one and number two results are always GNOME and KDE in various orders. So yeah, I still really think that GNOME should really address the problem of app indicators soon. But other than that, there isn't really there isn't much missing, for it to be usable in the way it was intended. So I've been and it probably been going on this topic for too long. So I just wanted to say that yeah, basically GNOME is not a bad desktop environment. It's just way different than most people are used to. And in order to experience it, I think you should have an open mind and try to use it the way it was intended.
Yeah, the last machine I had GNOME on, I decided I was going to try to work with it without any extensions and see how I got on. And it's painful at first, but then the first thing you notice is how much more responsive and performant the system is, because the reality is the whole infrastructure of surrounding the framework for the extensions is kind of a bolted on thing, or it you get this sense that it is.
Yeah.
And once you remove that, it just seems to run that much more smoothly than it did with the extensions.
You know what? I just realized that there are people complain about app indicators not being there. So if you close the Discord or Telegram window or any Teams or similar application, you have no visible indicator of it running in the background. But if you just don't close or don't minimize it, I guess that falls in line with how GNOME was intended to be used. So if you have this code running at all, you might as well just put it on a workspace that you're not using, and it will get out of your hair. And also, you mentioned no extensions. You know how in the extension manager there's a master toggle at the top that turns on and off all extensions.
Yeah.
As Leo Chavez pointed out, that doesn't just turn off the extensions, that turns off extension support in a way. And he said that GNOME performance actually improves. So if you have no extensions running, but you have the master toggle turned on, it still decreases the performance a bit, as opposed to if you have the master toggle turned off.
Yeah.
So after I learned that, I have a Surface tablet it's a quite old 4th generation Intel CPU. So since then I'm just using GNOME on it without any extensions, and the extension support turned off, so I can have the best performance I can get out of it on GNOME. And I will continue to use GNOME on it because it's still the best desktop for primarily touchscreen based workflow.
Yep, I agree. Oh, we got another We got another letter here. You want to take this one, Joe?
No, not really, but I will. This is from Nomen Nesio. I hope I got that last name right. Hi, mintCast. Sorry for the typos. Definition: ridiculous, deserving or inspiring ridicule, absurd, preposterous, or silly.
Thank you for that.
Definition: preposterous. What? Thank you for what?
For defining those two words for us.
Oh, well, it's right here. Definition: preposterous.
No, I was thanking him.
Contrary to nature, reason, or common sense. Absurd. This sounds preposterous, absurd, but is it? So let's investigate. Embrace, expand, extinguish. How about applying this cancerous behavior to distros? Not just making them mere MS software, not just making them an app, a client for a serious OS, but making them ourselves and then intercepting them. And extinguishing those pesky repos and shared libraries with our own. MS Store, GitHub, the biggest repo is intercepted. Now it's time for removal of shared libraries and fast and secure software based on shared libraries. Unteach kids, Windows is your computer, it's your PC, there's nothing else. Now there are no such things as distros repos. Come to us, our store, website, GitHub. We package it for you. You don't need those repos. It works with the distros we recommend. These distros are compatible with Windows, and all apps are developed for us, and we get money if you want to publish here because you have to buy the key. The Windows warning and installation fail if you do not pay MS to sign your app. Now, MS earns money on every open source app via KDE. So in order to make Windows, I love this word, de facto standard, MS must break repos, all those nice self-contained apps, no more repos, no more pesky packaging, one pit stop. Microsoft Store, Kdenlive, GIMP, LibreOffice, you see, we love open source. Every time there's someone published software, it has to be in our store. And everyone pays us heavy money for the keys. Otherwise, it's unauthorized, dangerous app. You do not want side loading, do you? Be secure. It's for your own good. And then it has to work only when with chosen distros. From now the clients, the MS apps. Why do you ask for how to compile? It's already packaged for you and is only compatible with the chosen ones. Awesome. No more fragmentation. And since MS Window is the de facto standard, then you only have to make it compatible with MS Windows and our shop. Who cares about distros that are not sanctioned? Use blessed ones. No more fragmentations. You just have to code for one shop that have the extension in the kernel to be MS Windows Client. Which distros are those? The ones that forbid competition to MS products. KOS promotes and has exFAT, but has no F2FS. F2FS is the best for flash storage, but since it directly competes with MS, it has to be canceled. Fake reason. Limited Ripet. Freedom. No. MS, yes. And exFAT is not free. And then 2, Manjaro. I tested this month some KDE ISO. They have like a lot of them, including the one in MS GitHub with wrongly split zip doable to join them, but and then a word I can't say. So they have this proprietary stuff that they, by default, saves to MS format by default, but not LibreOffice. What the heck? Ubuntu Snaps, proprietary format for Freedom GPL 2.3 apps. What the heck? And now Mir Client, Wayland implementation, 4 separate Windows server that do different things as Snaps. OMG Shmubuntu. By the way, is Shmubuntu an MS Store app? If you know more, let us know. What the heck is going on? P.S. Repository application software, miniature, in speakers, electronic tablets, verified, self-compiled Libre software, store app, apps, pods, pads, buds, side loading. Okay.
Can I go first?
That was a little bit disjointed, and I really tried to read it. You know,
You did a good job, Joe. I couldn't have done that.
I was listening to this. I was thinking, maybe I should have given this one to Moss. That way he could have his
No,
his,
Joe,
Oh, yeah,
Joe's
yeah.
good
his
with
audibly
that.
disdainful. First
I
off,
couldn't make
XFAT
sense
is
of parts
free.
of it. Yeah.
XFAT is free. You got Google. Oh boy. So it sounds to me like your
This was a
problem.
dissertation on the Microsoft idea of, what is it?
He got it
Microsoft.
wrong.
Embrace, expand, extinguish.
It's embrace, extend, extinguish.
Yeah.
He said expand is extend.
Right.
Yeah. Well, he did say sorry for the typos ahead of time. It sounds like what he's got a problem with here is the Microsoft Store and funneling people in and making. It sounded like he
And he
believes that.
also has an issue with Microsoft buying GitHub and people continuing to use GitHub.
And he's not the only one.
Yeah.
No,
I'm not
but
saying
I think
he's wrong. But
Has Microsoft owning GitHub had negative effect on projects that are hosted on GitHub?
absolutely not.
Yes. Yes, it has.
Like,
Russian software developers have been totally cut off, regardless of whether they are in Russia or not.
Yes, but that has to do more with politics and less with the embrace, extend, extinguish model that he's describing.
They
here.
haven't been cut off at GitLab.
then go use GitLab. I don't know.
What I'm saying is that has less that with controlling the software market.
Yeah, because what it sounds like what he believes here is by putting LibreOffice in the Microsoft Store, you're stopping people from going and getting it from the website, and that's just not true. I mean that you don't want side loading. I don't recall.
It would be true if Microsoft had their way, which is what I think his point is.
But if you're getting
Do we believe
LibreOffice from the
that?
Microsoft Store, it's still more or less the same application that you would get from the website. So
look,
what is the problem with getting it from the Microsoft Store?
I'm pretty sure that if Microsoft could make Linux disappear today, they would.
I'm not sure I believe that either, because I think they need Linux doing a lot of the heavy lifting, because they're using it for Azure. That there's on the server side, Linux has been covering the heavy lifting for so many years now. And
if they could change the licensing on Linux so that they owned it, they would.
But then they would have to pay people for the development.
Ah.
And right now, much of the internet, much of the infrastructure is leaning against, and this is a point of contention out there, that many of these
Just
projects,
hire them as Microsoft employees.
then you got to pay them, then you have to provide benefits to them, and then once they're gone, nobody is going to pick up the project and keep it going, such the way open source works now, and much of the world's internet infrastructure depends on that.
Yeah, that has happened with open source, but it's also happened with closed source too. I mean, there's a lot of Windows applications that no longer have developers.
There's a lot of Google apps that no longer exist.
Yeah, there's that too. I think the Microsoft we have now, though, and this is my opinion, is not interested in extinguishing open source or Linux. First off, it's not worth the effort when we really only constitute people like us that only use Linux. Do we even make up 1%? Because
it's about 1%, 2%.
Because you've got, I would imagine you've got a vast number of people that are using Linux at work, or they're using it for a specific purpose, and then all of their consumer devices are running something Windows, iOS.
A lot of people
whatever.
that don't know that they use Linux because it's in the back end of whatever server they're
using.
Exactly.
So, that being said, any effort Microsoft would make to make Linux go away, I think would be a waste of their resources. F2FS being the best for flash storage, I don't know that It is. I mean, the thing about exFAT is it works in no matter what device you plug it into, and it's in the kernel now. If you've got a recent kernel, it's a module right there in tree. And yeah, like I said before, exFAT is definitely free. Manjaro. Yeah, some of this I'm not sure how to respond. The snaps, the thing people are kind of getting a little uncomfortable with is this move towards containerization. And some people interpret that as lazy development because we're no longer relying as much on shared libraries, because now a developer, if he wants to base his software on a library that he doesn't want removed from the tool chain, all he's got to do is incorporate that into the container, and then you don't have to worry about that. Well, that's part of the reason Windows has worked for so long, is because their kernel relies heavily on backwards compatibility. You can go, for the most part, you can get a Windows 3.1 app or a Windows 95 app and install it on Windows 11, and it will work. You try that with Linux, and you'll get nothing.
No, it's not really likely that you install something that was intended for Windows 98 to run on Windows 11, because the libraries
You've got a
themselves
compatibility
change.
mode that works.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of games that I've been installing ever since Windows ME, and they've worked with every iteration. But you go back like a year, you try to install something based on Python 2 on a modern machine, and it's just not going to work, and that's part of the reason things like snaps and Flatpak was designed for to begin with, is that way if you absolutely have to rely on an older tool chain, then
just checked, my system doesn't even have Python 2.
Right, it's been deprecated nearly completely, but you have apps out there like that solitaire game that
I remember when
likes.
Python 2 was declared obsolete and everything had to use Python 3 for security reasons, and spending a couple of weeks converting code. So yeah,
and you've just got stuff out there that's just never going to get converted. So if you want those things, they're going to have to be containerized.
But containerized apps can still use the same library. For example, if you have Flatpaks installed and you have they download the runtimes, there are shared runtimes. For example, if we have multiple GTK apps, they can just use the same copy of the GTK libraries.
Yeah,
so I'm not sure to what extent this works on snaps, but on Flatpaks this has gotten a lot better. So it depends on what the method of containerization is. So snaps are these compressed image files that have to be mounted with virtual file systems and have to be loaded to RAM. But Flatpaks are just files on your disk, as like if they were regular programs, only that they are not using the system libraries, they're using their own runtimes. So in that sense, so from my point of view, my main complaint about snaps is that on a desktop use, where you have probably less RAM than a server would, having to deal with snaps being loaded into RAM and mounted, it's sort of, I guess it makes them more secure, but maybe what Flatpak does is plenty enough.
It is. And what occurred to me is that when you do it the snap way, that is it is a device mounted. It shows up in LSBLK. Why is that important? Well, when you install a Flatpak, it gets installed to your home directory, which is fine
if you specify it for the user, but by default, Flatpak installs stuff on the system.
You don't use a sudo command unless it just calls sudo. I've noticed that it's got a var directory right there in your home directory.
If you don't add the -- user option, it will be a system, right? So if you just do the Flatpak remote add FlatHub and you don't add the dash user, it will be a system-wide thing. And if you install anything like that, it will be available for all users. But if you add the dash user for comment, it will be in your home directory.
It seemed to me like when I was thinking about that, it seemed like the way Snap does it, it was more of a system-wide solution, which would make more sense for a distribution like Ubuntu that was by its own proclamation a commercial offering, you know, so you would need something that would be usable by multi-users and things. So anyway, if
one more thing, but as well for snaps, only the back end of the snap store is proprietary closed source.
Yeah.
Not the snap format. Not the snap format, as far as I know.
Okay, that is changing. There is a new Snap store coming out that is not back-end proprietary, and it will be implemented, I think, in 2210.
Yeah, I saw.
Is it replacing the current one, or is it done by Canonical?
Yes.
Is it Flutter based?
I don't know.
All right, so yeah, again, thank you for all the keep the comeback or keep the feedback coming, folks. This is more than we've had in a long time. In fact, it felt a little awkward because we hadn't done it in such a long time. Moving on to check this out. And
okay, in the check this out this section, the first two are mine. And the first one is the audio bookshelf. It's the GitHub page for it. I had talked about that in my bi-weekly wanderings. I do recommend checking it out if you have a lot of audiobooks or if you need a desktop podcast server. The link is there. Give it a try. The next one is a YouTube video link to Linus Tech Tips, where he tries to solder an HDMI port, a replacement micro HDMI port. And he even mentions how terrible the micro HDMI ports are, and they are horrible. And he kind of fails miserably to replace it, but it definitely shows you how not to do one. And then it does show some tips and tricks on things to make it a little bit easier. So definitely something that I enjoyed watching.
I went ahead, well, for some time now, I've had this little script that, and it's basically just an update script for Arch Linux. And I've had it on GitHub, basically just saved as a config file. But I've iterated on it for some time. It uses Pacman, Yay, Reflector, Pacman Contrib, and Flatpak to do a comprehensive update of any Arch Linux system. I thought I'd share the GitHub page here, and I linked to it in this article. As always, be sure to check the Arch Linux homepage and understand the updates you're making before committing to them, for there's always a chance an update will break your system, as we well know just from the last couple weeks. I've been using this script I named Full Up for so many years and have iterated on it slightly here and there. But I wanted to share it with folks. If it takes on a life of its own, I might make a proper GitHub page for it as a project, you know. As for right now, like I said, it's just a text file. One goal I have for it is to turn a couple of the commands, because basically it's just a list of commands, and then it echoes a couple of things just to make it look fancy as it runs. I'd like to replace a couple of the commands with functions that check to make sure, for example, the command it runs to start the update is a yay tac syu tac no confirm, and that's fine if you've got yay installed, but if you don't, the script will just stop dead right there. What I'd like to replace that with is a function that checks to see if Yay is installed, and then if it is, then run the command, and if it's not, then do the little wget magic to download it and make package tac isc, install it, and then run the command. And then likewise with there's a couple of commands at the end where it does some package cache cleanup. That used to be part of Pacman, and recently, I think like a couple of years ago, they took that out of Pacman and put it into a package called Pacman Contrib, which gives you the ability to clean the package cache. And likewise, check and see if it's got the package. If not, do the necessary magic to install it. But I haven't taken the time to learn how to do that yet. But I thought maybe if I shared it with the rest of the world, somebody might have some input on how to get that to work. So the link is right there in the show notes.
I am sensing DNF5 is in your future.
For Arch Linux?
I think Yay is going away all over.
Well, the Yay is just one option for integrating the AUR into Pacman, or having a one-stop method of just installing AUR packages without having to physically download them and then make
he won't convert his script to DNF if Yay goes away. What he'll do is he'll automatically alias all the Yay commands to DNF commands.
Well, you ain't even got to do that. Just change it to
by DNF. It's Fedora.
That's a Fedora. That's an RPM package manager.
Paru is an alternative. It was a fork of Yay.
DNF is not Fedora only. It covers.
I know it's.
It is very well useful in Open Mandriva and
RPM.
Anything running RPM, but I think it'll go to Arch too.
DT made a video a few months ago about he recommending people from switching from Yay to Paru because Paru is more actively maintained, and it's the commands are basically the same, only you don't type Yay, you type Paru, and because it was a fork of Yay.
I tend to do whatever Manjaro's doing because they're the ones that are putting the most thought and effort into the Arch Linux. I was surprised because Yay
but Manjaro, is Manjaro using Yay in any way?
Yeah, it's in the back end. Well, it was in the back end of their PAMIC program that they use.
Isn't PAMIC just its own thing?
It's got package kit and Yay for the.
But doesn't Paru PAMIC itself work as an AUR helper as well?
I think to this day, I tried to install it the other day, and it still pulls Yay as a necessary dependency in order to have access to the AUR. Now, if you install it without Yay, then you can only update packages in the default repositories, because then it's just using Pacman on the back end. That's the way I understood it by looking at package browser, because you can install PAMIC on a vanilla Arch system, but it's a huge thing. It's updated quite a lot, and it takes a long time to compile it. So usually if I install it at all, it's just so that I can do a lot of batch installing and then I get rid of it. So anyway, it's out there. If folks want to take a look at it, go right ahead. Moving on to housekeeping and announcements. Thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube. Post at the mintcast subreddit. Chat with us on Telegram, Discord, Facebook, or post directly at http, that should be https, mintcast.org. Our next episode will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on October 2nd, 2022. Next live stream will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on September 24th, 2022. Next live stream will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on October 8th, 2022. get the live stream converted to your time zone with the link in the show notes. Live stream information is at mintcast.org/livestream. On to wrap up. Joe, how can we find you out there?
Well, if you like the sounds of my voice, you can catch me on a couple of my other shows. I'm on Linux Link Tech Show, which you can find at tllts.org. Or you can catch me on Linux Lugcast, which is linuxlugcast.com. You can send me an email directly, jb@mintcast.org, or you can hit up my Ko-fi site, link in the show notes, and buy me a coffee. Moss.
Well, I'm on every week on Full Circle Weekly News, every month or so on Distro Hoppers Digest. My email is bardmoss@pm.me, and my other information can be found at itsmoss.com. Bill?
You can email me at bill@mintcast.org. I'm Bill_H on Discord, at WCHauser3 on Twitter, and WCHauser3 on Facebook as well. Also, check out my other podcast. The website is 3ftpodcast.org. The name of that podcast is 3 Fat Truckers, where we it appears on YouTube and downloadable on the opposite weekends of mintCast. Norbert, how about you?
You can send me an email at norbert@mintcast.org. And Nishant wasn't here us today. And Nishant wasn't here with us today, but you can send him an email at nishant@mintcast.org. He's Recon Ghost on Instagram, Recon Ghost at GitHub, Ghost.recon on Discord, and Maverick00783 on Steam.
Before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. Norbert, Londoner, Tony H., and all others for our audio editing. Josh Lowe and myself for all the work on the website. Hopstar for our logo. InitRD for the animated Discord logo. Londoner for our time syncs. Myself for hosting the Linode, which runs our website. Archive.org for hosting our audio files. The Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about each fortnight. Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
Goodness.